Good evening, everyone. It is 7:09 p.m. Tuesday, June the 2nd. I'm going to call this a regularly scheduled City Council meeting to order. Would all please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. That felt good. Would the city secretary please call the roll?
Mitchell,
Here.
Coach,
Here.
Ellison. Okay. Shield,
Here.
Rizzo,
Here.
Villalobos,
Present.
Tobias.
Here.
All right, I do believe Councilmember Ellison is here, so I'd like the record to state that he's here. He's been participating. We're just trying to get him logged in.
President.
There we go. Okay. Next up, approval of the minutes. Councilmember Shield.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the special meeting minutes for April 21st, the council meeting minutes for April 21st, council special meeting minutes for May 5th, council meeting minutes from May 5th, council special meeting minutes from May 19th, and the council meeting minutes from May 19th.
Second.
It's been moved by Councilmember Shield, seconded by Councilmember Ellison. Is there any further discussion?
Yes, I would just like to thank our city secretary, Jennifer, for getting us so caught up. Thank you so much. I know it took a lot of work and a lot of effort to get that done, so I appreciate it. Thank you.
And thanks to Carla for that as well.
Okay, and Carla.
Thank you, Carla. It does feel kind of nice to be able to get caught up on those. So, all right, next up is citizen comments period. At this time, we ask anyone in the audience or on phone. Oh, I'm sorry. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed. Motion carries 7-0. Next up, citizen comments period. At this time, we ask anyone in the audience or who is waiting on the phone to speak. We ask that you limit your comments to 3 minutes and that you direct those comments to the mayor and council. We also ask that you state your name for the record. I have two registered to speak, but we've agreed they're going to speak on agenda item number 27. So that's all that I have registered here. Is there anyone else here locally that would like to speak? Seeing none, is there anyone online or on the phone that is wishing to speak? All right. If there are no objections, I'm going to go ahead and close citizen comments period. It's now closed. Next up, agenda item number 8, report on Kyle Mass Food Distribution Event Presentation. Councilman Rizo.
Mayor, first of all, I'd like to take this time to thank Mayor, Council, Scott Sellers, Jerry Hendricks, Samantha Armbruster, Chief Barnett, our PD officers, the COP members, past council member Daphne Tenorio, TDS, Hasty ISD, their staff, council member Villalobos' family, as well as my wife, and the volunteers and the staff of the Central Texas Food Bank for the support, logistical help, and with getting the word out for planning and implementing this mass food distribution. We were able to touch 1,450 families this past weekend. During COVID-19, many of the families have lost their jobs, or some of the head of households have lost their jobs. And I know there's a need right now in the community to help those families out. And I think the city and all its partners coming together and being able to accomplish this really helped out a lot of people Saturday afternoon. But with that being said, I just want to say that, we can continue to do this. We've got another food drive planned for the 18th, which is a Thursday, 18th, I believe.
13th.
It's the 18th, right? 18th. The 18th, yeah. So for June the 18th from 9 to 12. And I just want to say, I want to give a special thank you to the COP program, our Citizens on Patrol. They were there from the beginning of the event, way before the beginning of the event, to the end of it. And I was able to bring out a little bit of help. I recruited a sheriff's deputy, Steve Avalos, to come out and spell them a little bit. But that showed me that this program works and that they do need a couple of more members, a part of it, to be able to cover an event like this, so they're not standing there all 5 hours. This next one will be a little shorter, but I can tell you they proved themselves above and beyond, and it was a great event. And I also just want to thank Councilmember Villalobos and Tobias for being there. They're dancing, they're singing. It really made the morning go by fast, and I had a great time. So, by the way, we're gonna have a dance off when we get a chance. I think you and Dex would do great in that dance off. So it'd be great to see that. But I just want to thank everybody for coming out, participating with that, and the staff, and organizing this. It was a great event. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Rizo. Any further comments? Councilman Shield.
I just wanted to say thank you to Councilmember Rizzo for, really supporting this. And when I came out for just a little bit, because of course I couldn't help, but it was amazing to see, first of all, the organization of our Citizens on Patrol, the organization of the Central Texas, the food bank was just amazing. And the number of cars that were there the first, part of the morning just unfortunately saddened my heart, just because of the need that is out there. And so hopefully we can get past this, and we won't need to have to do this as to such a standard in the future. And so thank you.
I can definitely thank you for coming out. I know your arm was a sling, but I really appreciate your heart for coming out, trying to participate. I can tell you that the families did receive quite a bit of food. They received a box of dry food, a box of vegetables, and there were big boxes, a box of frozen chicken, and 2 to 3 gallons of milk per family. So it definitely did help these families that came out here.
I think we couldn't help but dance. They had some good music going on. There was some late 80s, some early 90s music going on. But I think the other thing, too, is just keeping the environment as light as possible to allow people to feel comfortable being there. So we got a lot of good conversation with some of the people that were coming in, thanking us. And so it was an excellent opportunity to see our citizens. It was also an excellent opportunity to bring the family in and to volunteer and support those people that needed assistance. And so look forward to the next one, and I'm happy to be a part of it and planning it. So thank you. Thank you for that opportunity.
My take real quickly, it was just great to see everybody out there. Again, I want to mirror what Councilman Rizo was saying about thank you to the city staff, especially Samantha Armbruster for doing such an amazing job, especially on the social media part of it and promoting this, and Jerry Hendricks for getting all the stuff squared away with Scott Sellers as well, city manager, helping us with the TDS trailer. It was a great event, seeing everybody out there. So I really appreciate everybody, the community, for coming out and continue to support it. We've got a long way to go, and so continue to support the Central Texas Food Bank. And of course, thank you, Kyle PD, for all your support, Citizens on Patrol, and everybody else that supported it. Thank you very much.
On a last note, one of the things that we did is we gave out some information. We passed out some flyers. Thanks to the help with Samantha, we're able to put some flyers together in Spanish. Since our numbers have been up a little bit in the Spanish community, we're able to put out some COVID information out there on keeping families safe, keeping workers safe, and hopefully we can put a dent into COVID-19.
Thank you very much. Anything else? Next up, agenda item number 9, task force update on police headquarters construction. This is Chief's item.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mayor and Council. Jeff Barnett, for the record, Chief of Police. I have 3 very brief updates. Number 1, our committee is continuing to meet regularly and share information and move the various processes forward. The council recently approved an agreement and contract with Bowie and Company for our public education campaign. And I have to tell you, they've hit the ground running. They came very prepared for their first meeting. They had a lot of questions, and they are certainly prepared to gather information and get an education campaign ready for our citizens and for everyone to see. Next, the committee has selected for recommendation a construction manager at risk company. And the contract with that company is with our legal department. We expect that to be ready by the end of this week and should be presented to council for consideration at our very next city council meeting in 2 weeks. And lastly, we've continued those regular meetings with PGAL, and they've done a good job at keeping information flowing and coordinating with all of these new entities with which we're partners. Everything is moving forward. We have probably another couple of meetings between now and our next city council meeting. So we should have more updates and also the contract with our construction manager at risk for your review and consideration.
Thank you, Chief.
Sir.
I'm pretty amazed at the technology right now. This is pretty cool. We can see you very clearly in front of us. Just a second ago, I could see both Councilmember Ellison and Mayor Pro Tem Coach here, and the feed is coming in just as if you're sitting right over there in the corner. So that's pretty cool. So just quick shout out to IT and Matt Dawson and that crew for doing something that is exceeding my expectations. So thank you for that. Anyone have any further comments or updates on the police station? Thank you, Chief.
Sir.
Next up, CIP road projects and consent agenda presentation.
Mayor and Council, Leon Barba, City Engineer. I'll keep my mask on. I think that's probably the best thing to do since I'm up here at the microphone. I'm here to present your updates on the CIP. On the Lehman Road project, we're about 67% complete. As I mentioned before in a previous meeting, the Plum Creek Bridge is complete, and Lehman is still closed from Hiver to Button Creek Road, and we're still expecting to complete this project by August of 2020. The picture that you're looking at is looking north from Hiver back towards Lehman High School, so you can see they've already put down the first layer of mix for that project, so they're moving pretty quickly on that. Burleson Street, based on our pay estimates, we're at 83% complete. As I've mentioned before, we've had some pavement distresses on the sections of road. They have started the French drain to alleviate that problem. The utilities north of the roundabout are still 95% complete. The reason I say 95%, we haven't finished topping out those inlets or getting them coated, so that has to come later when we get through the project. Our completion date is around August of 2020. I want to mention that our project manager has been talking to the contractor about trying to expedite the work. I know there's some work that could be done. One of the big factors that has been delaying the contractor is that bore that we have to do underneath the railroad track. We've been asking him to look at getting a different subcontractor. Apparently he has a contract with them that he doesn't want to break. Plus, the permit that we have there with Union Pacific is under that contractor's name, so I don't want to go through that exercise again with Union Pacific and trying to change the name on the contractor. So we're going to push him to maybe do some of the paving and some of the road reconstruction that's around the area so we can get started and get this project wrapped up. The Southside Wastewater Project, on the consent agenda, item number 19, we continue to struggle with acquiring some easements, and so we're having to spend additional time on the acquisition of 2 remaining easements. We have another that's in their eminent domain, so that one we're working also. Based on our pay estimates, we're around 52% complete, and we still have 1 crew working on the lift station at Post Road, and this picture shows the crew working there on the gravity line at Public Works. On the wastewater treatment plant, the consent agenda, item number 11, that's for a 20-foot temporary easement that PEC needs to make a connection to that construction trailer that's out there right now. We did issue the notice to proceed on May the 26th. Previously, I'd said May 25th, but since that was a holiday, we went ahead and moved it up to May 26th. A couple of comments that the contractor made to us. I don't know what this means, but he thought it was very unusual. It seems like there's a lot of public out there taking pictures around at the property line, so we don't know what's happening with that. He's also had drones out there in the area, and he's kind of concerned because he's going to start bringing in some big equipment, and he's just concerned about those drones flying around out there. The Indian Paintbrush Lift Station Force Main relocation, this is related to consent item agenda number 13. There was a small strip about 15 feet by a couple hundred feet that we needed to get from that the county helped us get. So they have dedicated that easement to us so we can install our force main there. I do want to make pass on a kudo to the Public Works Department. They're about 75% of the way complete with that 12-inch force main they're installing, and it's all related to the Daisy Lane Road improvements. FM 1626 pump station improvements. This is related to consent agenda item number 17. We're asking HDR Engineering to provide a preliminary engineering report. We originally had approved a contract with them to design and build a 500,000-gallon water storage tank. With the ARWA deciding to make their delivery point at 1626, we needed to increase the size of the storage tank. So now we're looking at about a 1 million gallon storage tank at that area, and possibly running in line also from 1626 up north along 1626 up to Kohler's back to well site number 4. So we've expanded the scope of the work on that project. And that concludes my presentation. Any questions?
Any questions for Mr. Barba? Councilor Shield.
Can you find out or get a little bit more information on where the people are coming from to watch the construction of the wastewater treatment plant, and also if they know where those drones are coming from? Because if they're coming from the Waterleaf subdivision, I'd like to know and see if we can help put a halt to that.
I will
Okay?
do that, yes.
All right.
Any other questions on any of the consent agenda items? Okay, thank you. Entertain motions, or if somebody wants to pull one.
Mayor, I make a motion to approve consent agenda 11, 12, 13, all the way through 23.
Second it.
It's been moved by Councilmember Villalobos, seconded by Councilmember Rizo, that we approve the consent agenda items 11 through 23. Is there any further discussion on that motion?
Mayor, I just have a question about number 14. If Mariana could just, put it out there for the community a little bit about what this, the proposal for the fireworks show entails, how long it's going to be, and what we can kind of expect from it.
Mariana Espinoza, Parks and Recreation Director, for the record. This year's fireworks show is expected to be an up to 30-minute fireworks show, with the working with the vendor, choreographed to music.
Okay.
All activities at the Plum Creek Golf Course will not be held, but the fireworks show will still take place.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, no other questions. All those in favor say aye.
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 All opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Next up, agenda item number 24, consider impossible action. First and final reading, approve an ordinance authorizing the issuance of City of Kyle, Texas combination tax and revenue credits of obligation, certificates of obligation, Series 2020, in an amount not to exceed $33,955,000 to pay for the wastewater treatment plant expansion. Mr. Mohit.
Mayor Pro Tem, council members, for the record, I'm Pervez Mohit, City's Director of Finance. You'll recall that on April 7th of this year, City Council held a public hearing on the issuance of certificates of obligation in an amount not to exceed $33,955,000 to pay for the city's wastewater treatment plant expansion project costs. Today, under agenda item number 24, staff is requesting City Council's approval of a bond ordinance authorizing the issuance of City of Kyle combination tax and revenue certificates of obligation in the par amount not to exceed $33,955,000. The final debt amount is going to be less than the maximum that council had authorized us to consider. This evening, we have an exceptionally positive update to share with the council regarding the pricing of the bonds. The city had an excellent pricing experience in the tax-exempt market this morning. In just a few minutes, I'll request the city's financial advisor to review the key details of this transaction with you. the city's overall credit rating and a strong financial position, including the city's liquidity position, meaning the reserves amount that the city holds, played a major role this morning. The city's certificate of obligation or bonds were priced with a premium, approximately 5.5 million in total premium. In other words, because of the premium, the city was able to obligate only 28.3 million in bonds rather than the entire 33.9 million. So this helps the city issue less debt, but still we are able to generate the total 33.8 million that we need in proceeds. We have with us this evening the city's financial advisor, Mr. Chris Allen, with RBC Capital Markets, and the city's bond counsel. We have Mr. Gregory Miller with us with Bickerstaff Heath Delgado Acosta. At this point, Mayor, I would like for the city's financial advisor, Mr. Chris Allen, to brief the city council on city's credit rating, recently issued by S&P Global Ratings. Secondly, who our competition was in the tax-exempt bond market this morning that we were competing with. Third, how the City of Kyle bonds actually priced this morning. And finally, to review some of the key elements or items with you pertaining to this bond transaction. With that, Mayor, I would like to ask Chris to join us.
Good evening. Thank you, Pervez. Good evening, Mayor and Council. For the record, my name is Chris Allen. As Mr. Mohit mentioned, RBC Capital Markets, we represent the city as financial advisor. As Pervez mentioned, we had a very positive day today. I don't have a presentation in front of you, but I wanted to outline a few key items. We entered the market at about 8:30 this morning, Central Time, and ran an order period for about an hour and a half to 10 a.m. When we entered the market, it had a weak tone. The Treasury market was off a couple of basis points. But as we went through the order period, we saw that the market began performing a little bit better. At the end of the day, well, let me tell you a little bit about who was on the calendar. I mean, I think what was very positive about the market today and this week, for that matter, is that there's very, very little Texas paper or bonds that are being marketed. I have a list of a handful of issuers that will be in the market. One that's more importantly, which is almost identical credit to you, it's the city of Lavon, which is a city in the North Texas area, DFW area. It also holds a AA- credit rating. So that was our real competition. Just so you know, we had, before the order period was up, we had all of the maturities subscribed for, and many of them oversubscribed. So for instance, we were looking for, 33 million in bonds, and at the end of the day, or at the end of the order period, we actually had $188 million worth of bonds. So that being said, we were able to lower yields anywhere from 3 to 5 basis points throughout the yield curve. How we compared to City of Lavon, on average, we priced at or through each of the maturities of the bonds, generally in the 2 to 5 basis point range. And then in the 2040 maturity, the term bond, we were able to outprice them by 16 basis points.
That's great, Chris.
So all in all, the city was able to obtain an all-in true interest cost of 2.77%, which is very, very exceptional.
Hey, Chris, I know you said you didn't have the any presentation materials ready, which is totally okay. Do you have that yield curve analysis done that you could send to council? Because that really is a great savings.
Absolutely. I'm happy to share that with you. I'll provide that to Pervez and he can share it with you. I'm happy to. Just to kind of list the players, Bickerstaff, Heath, Delgado Acosta is your bond attorney. Understand Gregory Miller is on the line here. If you have any legal questions, the senior manager on this transaction was Raymond James. They did an exceptional job. And there was two co-managers, Jeffries LLC and Ramirez and Company LLC. As Pervez mentioned, and as a matter of course, when we issue bonds or the city issues bonds, we go to the credit ratings to seek a rating. And in this particular instance, we were affirmed the AA minus. Pervez always does an outstanding job with going through all the metrics and the economics for the city. And I just wanted to point out a couple of things about the positives that S&P says about the city. One is that as Pervez mentioned, you have strong management. That's you guys. So congratulations on that. Very strong liquidity, meaning you have a proper amount of reserves. In fact, in excess of reserves that a city your size has. Where we get dinged, and dinged is kind of a relative term, is they mentioned that there's a very weak debt and contingent liability profile, which means that you're a growing city, in my opinion, and with growth, that requires capital improvements, and capital improvements require debt issuance. So, that's something you can't help as a growing city. I mean, growth is a double-edged sword, as you know. As Pervez mentioned, we were able to issue $28.3 million in certificates, but garnered your project fund of to be $33,500,000. So all in all, we had a very great day. A lot of that has to do with the name of the city, your good credit rating, and we had a very good day in the market. So with that, I certainly would recommend approval, and I'm happy to answer any questions if you have any.
Thank you, Chris. Any questions for Pervez or Chris or the team?
No, just great job. Exactly. Thank you.
I have a question. It's maybe more for Pervez. I know we've been discussing the timeline with the bond issuance being put basically as far to the back as possible to help us take advantage of some of this in the favorable market conditions. Is the project still proceeding as planned from a construction and funding standpoint? And are we going to run into any cash flow troubles between now and when we're able to actually fund take down the bonds and issue the debt and get the capital to give to the folks doing the construction?
No, Mayor. We had the city council adopt a resolution to reimburse the city of Kyle for using or borrowing funds in the meantime. So we have that already in place. The closing of these bonds should be less than 30 days. So we'll have funds on hand within 30 days. So by the time the contractor rolls his or their heavy equipment onto the construction site, we should have adequate funds in the bank by that time.
And what's the scheduled construction time frame, just so that we're all clear as to what this project is going to look like from a construction standpoint? That might be a Leon.
I don't know if Leon is still on the line, but my understanding is 18 to 20 months is their estimate.
Mayor and Council, Leon Barba, City Engineer. We're asking for the 650 days to complete this project, so roughly about 2 years.
And from a capacity standpoint, we're still feeling confident that we're going to be able to get the job completed prior to average MGD exceeding capacity on a daily basis?
We're moving as fast as we can. That's our plan. Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you, Leon.
Yes.
Wow. Any other questions? I'd like to make a motion to approve agenda item number 24. It's been moved by the mayor, seconded by Councilmember Shields. Is there any further discussion? Great job. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion carries 7-0.
Mayor,
Councilmember Shield.
after looking at the consent agenda, there was item number 20, which was a first reading. Did you want to finally approve?
Do we need to do that, Scott, on the utility burial policy?
Yeah, it's fine. You can.
Okay, are there any objections to finally passing agenda item number 20? All right, without that, then we're going to go ahead and finally pass it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Shield. All right, next up, agenda item number 25, approve a resolution to adopt the City of College Drainage Master Plan and an ordinance updating related, of ordinance updates related to the Drainage Master Plan. Kathy, thank you.
Hello, Mayor, council members, Kathy Raker, City Stormwater Management Plan Administrator for the record. I am here, I want to apologize. I actually went back and I looked and rewatched the last council meeting, and we actually did approve the Drainage Master Plan for the resolution, so that is, we don't need to do that tonight, so my apologies for putting that up there. So what I'm going to do is focus on the first reading of the ordinance updates as related to the Drainage Master Plan. There is a document, Matt, if you could show the ordinance updates. Okay, so these are the ordinances that we've already looked at before, but these have actually been reviewed by Paige and her group, and so now we are here to present them. I didn't know, do y'all want to go through these various ordinance updates? It's going to affect chapter 17, 32, and chapter 50. The majority of them, I think, are going to fall under the chapter that related to flooding, chapter 17. We are making some more stringent requirements to try to get a handle on drainage infrastructure, and a little bit more stringent requirements than what we've had in the past. And then chapter 32, there's a few that pertain there, and then another big chunk of them are related to the inspections and actually having certified inspections of stormwater structural controls, those HOAs as well as commercial sites. And what we're looking at is a certified inspection once every 3 years. And something that we've discussed proposing is possibly the first inspection, actually those first inspections coming out of the drainage fund to try to get everybody off on the right foot. So possibly the city actually cover the cost of the first inspection for all HOAs, not commercial sites. It would be for the HOAs.
We're trying to keep up with you here.
Okay.
Do we
Sorry.
have, where is that? Is that recommendation in the packet?
Yes. It was a PDF document, and I see it on that screen.
In the resolution language, as far as the financing piece, do we have a fiscal note on that or anything?
No, that's just something that we're proposing. That,
Okay.
That if council, once we actually get to, there's going to be pieces that we have to actually get to before we actually have that certified inspection. In the ordinance update, under the stormwater, chapter 50 updates, there's a section that talks about the city actually pre-certifying engineers. It's not going to be anything like an RFQ. We're going to pretty much tell engineers, submit an application. I'll actually follow up, vet the applications, and then we'll just maintain a consistent list of certified engineers that specialize in drainage that can come out, and then HOAs and commercial sites can actually pick from that list so that they're not required to actually, they can actually do some shopping around. But it'll be a certified list that the city maintains for entities to choose from for those inspections, so that there will be a choice. And again, there's going to be vetting and stuff that has to occur between now and then. So when we're actually ready to present that portion to council, when we have our certified list of engineers. However, when it comes to that piece, I'm guessing it'll probably have to go out for bid, since I personally would probably like one inspector looking at all of them initially, so that you're not getting varying opinions, to keep it consistent. So that's just something that we will have an internal discussion on once these ordinances are passed, if they're passed.
Do you have a sense of how much that might cost?
I'm guessing anywhere from, I actually asked San Marcos, who's already doing this, and they don't really know the exact cost, but she was saying anywhere from $350 to $500 per inspection. And we roughly have probably 30 HOA-owned detention ponds now. Don't quote me on that number. So, and again, we can stagger that.
Scott Sons for the record. We've talked about several ideas moving forward. I think that's probably for a future conversation.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we're not at that stage just yet. That's
Okay.
something that council could consider.
Does anybody have any questions for Kathy on the plan? Councilman Rizzo.
No questions, but I just wanted to say thank you for working on this ordinance. I know being privy to some of the calls, I know how hard you've worked on this, and staff as well, the input. I actually learned a lot being a part of these calls, so I'm really glad. One of the things I didn't realize that, flooding doesn't just occur downstream with new development. It also happens upstream. We can accidentally dam something and flood things upstream. So I'm glad that we cover all these all these instances that could occur. So I just want to thank you and your team for doing just a great job and your due diligence on addressing all the flooding needs. Thank you.
I just like the fact that we're moving forward with something and we've got some direction, and obviously there'll be some more discussions, but thank you for the work, for giving us some direction. We've needed this for a while. Thank you.
Thank you.
Entertain a motion?
Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to approve the agenda item as written. Should I exclude the drainage master plan part?
Correct, yes.
Resolution.
Yeah, my apologies for
page.
that.
We just need the ordinance.
You need to exclude the drainage master plan. Is that the question?
Correct. So I guess just the motion should be the ordinance update as outlined related to the drainage master plan. So my motion is to approve the ordinance updates related to the drainage master plan.
Okay, it's been moved by Councilmember Ellison, seconded by Councilmember Shields. Is there any further discussion?
I just want to second all the comments and kudos to staff and Kathy in particular. I enjoyed seeing the updates made there, in particular to the LIDs and the new expectations there. So thank you for all of those changes.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed. Motion carries 7-0. Do we want to bring that item back? Is there any objection to the ordinance update being finally passed? All right, seeing none, there is no objection. It's finally passed.
Sorry, Kathy Raker. I actually did take a call today, and I was under the impression it would require 2 readings.
Would you like it to come back?
I would.
It's fine.
Okay, well, I'll object and we'll bring it back.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, because I have a meeting on Monday to meet with the developer that just had some questions, and I just told him earlier today, because I thought some of them were pretty substantial and it would have required 2 readings. My apologies, you guys. So.
No worries.
Okay, thank you.
I also got a note that we can finally pass agenda item number 22. It's the extension of the disaster declaration. Is there any objection to that being finally passed? All right, seeing none, agenda item number 22 is finally passed. All right, next up, agenda item number 26, council discussion to establish staff direction on the recommendation for the finalist candidate of the city's next comprehensive plan, Mr. Coons.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, City Council. For the record, my name is Howard Kuntz. I'm the Community Development Director for the City of Kyle.
This item is a long time coming. We began working on this project, the Planning and Zoning Commission and planning staff, in February of 2019. Spent about somewhere in the neighborhood of 7 months going back and forth at different work sessions and other planning and zoning meetings, talking about a request for qualifications, RFQ, that was put forward on the street last September with the blessing of the council after they looked at it at their first September voting meeting. The applications came back. We had 6 respondents. Some were local, some were out of state. And after the selection committee, which was comprised of myself, the chairperson of the Planning and Zoning Committee or Commission, who is Michelle Christie, the vice chair, who is Tim McCutcheon, as well as councilpersons. Dex Ellison was on there. The chair or the director of the library, Paul Phelan, was on there as well. And we had some meetings with our finalist candidates after we had made a short list of who it was that we wanted to hear from. And to be a little bit more brief, the decision was that we felt the most capable contractor was the DTJ group out of Plano, Texas. We received a number of submittals, all of them related to qualifications. We tried to make the requests that we got in very heavy on past performance and also heavy on references and recommendations from past clients. This was not a proposal that was based on price alone, but instead was based on what we thought was the greatest actor who would be able to put forth a plan that effectively raised the bar for the next 10 years in the city of Kyle. I put in the staff report some of the comments that we received related to DTJ and how we felt that we would be able to have a very prosperous and functional working relationship with the group that they've put together. To that end, I've asked them to attend tonight's meeting so they can make themselves available to speak with you directly if you have any questions of them. Francois is on the call. Additionally, I believe that he's brought some other folks from his team that he put on the RFQ. Jason Claunch, I don't know if he's available yet. I know he had a conflict tonight with another meeting he was attending, but hopefully that meeting would end in time for him to come in and meet with us. Jason is known to the city, a known quantity, and works extensively in economic development and fiscal analyses. Additionally, Ryan is with us as well. And the chair of the PNC is with us, Michelle Christie. So I can make myself available for any questions you might have.
Anybody have any questions for Mr. Coons? How would the charrettes and town halls be conducted? Is the plan to, at this point, to proceed fairly much as it has been, envisioned before COVID-19?
I don't know the answer to that yet. That's a conversation I would definitely want to have during the negotiation process for developing the task order. But I did have a brief conversation last week with the principal on this application from DTJ. And Francois is available tonight, and he has a little bit of experience with this as he's working through it right now. So I think the best thing to do would be to get the firsthand information from him and get his experience as it's ongoing right now.
Sure.
Mr. Mayor, Council, this is Francois de Kock from DTJ Design. Thank you for this opportunity to speak to you tonight. Currently, we actually are working on a comprehensive plan, and we actually started before COVID-19. And my anticipation was that the client will decide actually to slow down the schedule, which was already very aggressive. And they did not. They said, no, we want to go ahead with all our meetings, and all our meetings must be virtual. That has been done extremely successful. We've learned a lot in the process as well. But I really would like to introduce you to Ryan Short. He's from Civic Brand, and they are in the forefront of digital engagement. In fact, where many other firms haven't done it yet, they actually already were doing that. I mean, they're known for that. So if you would allow me, I would love for me to introduce Ryan Short, that he can share with you a little bit about the virtual engagement during public engagement?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is Ryan from Civic Brand, and I can actually share my screen and show you some of the digital engagement tools if you would like to see that or time allows. But like Francois mentioned, our approach to public engagement is founded off of a famous Jane Jacobs quote that says, cities can provide something for everybody only if and only when they're created by everybody. And, we founded Civic Brand based on that quote. And we purposely thought that we saw that public engagement was broken in our mind, and we set out to change that. And our tools and our methods, there's a very combination of very traditional, meet people where they are, take a persona-based approach so that we are in a very equitable way using different tools to reach different audiences. So pre-COVID-19, that still meant there was a lot of digital tools because you would have individuals and families that can't come to public meetings. And as you know, when you do have public meetings, you often get the usual suspects that do show up. And so that's great for that audience, but we need to have digital tools and other methods of reaching different groups. And so for years, have been developing these digital tools. More recently, we've developed these virtual engagement rooms where it's a 3D experience that's the exact same as a meeting. And I think it's extremely important in these times of quarantine, but I think it's relevant always because there's different ways to reach different people. And even with the digital strategy, you still have to be diverse and you have to give people an out because you can't just go all digital either because there's people who have technology limitations. They aren't going to be able to access it. And so sometimes it's about going to very traditional old school methods of reaching people through the mail and traditional paper surveys and postcards, as well as these digital tools. And I'm happy to show you some of them, but that's kind of our quick elevator pitch on our approach and our process. But I do have it pulled up if anybody does want to see what the virtual engagement rooms look like. I can share that screen quickly.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Please.
I thought it was coming up. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. All right. So this is for a project that we did for the city of Las Cruces. And essentially what we can do is any virtual charrette or meeting that you would have in person, whether it's live or ongoing, we definitely recommend if there is a live piece that the live recording can live on and people can still participate at other times because everyone's schedules are different. We can't always make a live event. And so just as you would kind of scroll through a gallery style room, we can drop in any of these different stations. It's 100% customizable, whether some of them you might just watch a video and watch somebody speak. Other stations might be more of a mapping where they click on it and you want to ask them questions related to that, where they're going to drag and drop pins and tell you where they'd like new bike lanes and leave comments. So there's just a whole suite of custom tools that we've created that allows people to engage in interactive and creative ways. But like I said, it's really, we've been doing this pre-COVID. We've been using a lot of these digital tools, and I am finding some firms and agencies, they're kind of jumping in head first because they're forced to, but there's a lot of best practices that we've learned over the years that I think making sure you have that out for somebody that it's not working for, making sure that people aren't having to download a software for this to work, making sure that it works on all devices and tablets, so that it's translated when it needs to be translated. So that's just one of the tools at our disposal, but it's one of the newer tools.
That is very interesting. Have you had any experience so far getting the type of engagement that justifies the hefty amount that we're spending? Are you getting good traction with the virtual environment so far?
Yeah, it's actually interesting. We're actually getting more engagement because everybody's home, and they're a little bit more available to, instead of, it's a lot more inconvenient for me to drive out to town hall and sit in a meeting where I could be cooking dinner, pull up a live engagement workshop on my laptop while I'm cooking dinner and, talking to my family. And so we've actually seen engagement go up on a lot of these projects. As I mentioned before, we take a very persona-based approach. And so just like with a public meeting, you're going to get more of a certain demographic. With digital engagement, you're going to get a greater reach. And luckily, because we've all been forced to work in these environments, the amount of people who have digital access is pretty good. You're not, some people might be worried we're only going to get super tech savvy people, but it's actually been surprising. That said, we still do have to take a persona-based approach and pay attention to who we are not reaching through these tools and make sure that we're offering alternatives for them, because like that quote says, it's vital for us to make sure we're reaching the entire community.
Thank you, Ryan. Anyone have any questions or follow-up comments? Any updates from the group that's been working with Howard on this? Feedback?
Mr. Mayor, no, I'm just going to mention that I really appreciate Ryan's involvement. He shared with me quite a few things that they've been doing, that they've been extremely successful dealing with trolls, for instance, when people over and over will answer surveys. They have ways to prevent that from happening. They also have a way of not allowing people to rant and rave on some of these platforms. So they are very good at understanding how to deal with the public when it is an anonymous environment. So I can just mention that I think with them on board, and the fact that we're so forced now to do virtual engagement, I believe that you are in very good hands, and the city's in very good hands to be able to address public engagement that should be effective and needs to be effective to get the best plan and the best vision out there for the community of Kyle. So, Mr. Mayor, I wonder if there's any other questions that anyone may have at this point in time?
I know you're fairly early coming in, but I know you've probably done a general assessment of overall growth, infrastructure, future plans for the city of Kyle. Can you give me a general assessment of what you feel like you're attacking when you're coming in for the comprehensive plan?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, with the growth that you have currently, it is tremendous. You see the growth in Kyle, where you are located on 35, with the type of development that you had, and it still is coming. I think your downtown is, to me, a gem. The first time I visited the city and drove through the downtown area, I was amazed about how you were able to not only protect what you have, but even build upon that. Even the City Hall building is done in such a sensitive way, it really fits well. Now, what I can also then mention is that Jason Claus, who's on our team, he's a market and economic analyst, an economist. He has done work in Kyle for quite a few years now. He knows your city so well. He understands the impact of traffic. He understands the issues at hand. So at this point, I would like to introduce Jason Claus to maybe share with you a little bit about his perspective on growth and the economic and marketing side of Kyle. Jason.
Glad to have you on as well. I just, Mayor and Manager and Council, I just want to say thanks for allowing us to present tonight. And as Francois had mentioned, we've been involved with the City of Kyle on numerous projects for the last 12 plus years with Diane and Victoria and her team. And we've been intimately involved in watching the growth. We've been tracking all the active developments. We've been involved in a lot of the expansion of Plum Creek, and we're familiar with the future plans for some of the vacant tracks along I-35. I also want to echo the opportunity to help activate. I know that there's been a lot of investment in downtown, and look forward to hopefully having this plan continue to catalyze those projects. And we understand as well, there's been a tremendous amount, congratulations on your bonds. There's been a tremendous amount of infrastructure that's currently underway. We've been tracking that through city manager and his team. And so anyway, we look forward to continue to help you plan out the city. And congratulations, we've been following the sales tax for all the communities across Texas, and exciting to see your resiliency. And we look forward to integrating additional sustainability and resiliency plans, and making sure that as we have, which we always will, continue to have economic cycles, that we can use this plan to help you guys sort of balance those waves out as you are currently.
Thank you. I have a question for Pervez and or Howard. How much have we allocated in the budget for this?
We had budgeted, Mayor, 145,000.
And can we get a sense of where we're at in the expenditure side of that, and what the expectations are for if we approve?
We have not expended any monies from that budget line item, Mayor.
Right, but I'm wondering what this action, if I'm looking for a little bit of the process here, from where we are now to timeline for when the funds would be expended, and how that would work.
I can talk a little bit about how it was originally designed. We began with the budgeting process for the comprehensive plan last summer, with the expectation that the bid was, we actually wanted to put the bid on the street in the month of August. Took a little bit longer to get that completed and in front of you. We didn't get it on the street until September. The bids came back in October. My expectation was that we would have let the task order sometime in the month of December, and then throughout the months within the fiscal year of 2020, I thought that we would be able to make timely payments to whomever the contractor was that was selected, up until the point where the last one probably would have been made sometime in the neighborhood of the end of the fiscal year, or perhaps just after the end of the fiscal year, which would have been September 30th of 2020. That was the original expectation. To this point, Pervez is correct. We had, my expectation was that we had budgeted originally, I want to say it was 125 for the plan itself. And I wanted to hold, I want to say 20% back in contingencies, because it's been my experience and my observation that there's always a little bit of scope creep as you work through the process. You have an expectation going into the process, but then as you actually play it out in practice, theory is one thing, but practice is another. Usually you're going to have an expectation that there'll be a need for another meeting, or there'll be a need for another specialist to come in with an analysis, or there'll be a need for another chapter or something to that effect. So I wanted to be able to have money in reserve left over that we would be able to utilize to put into that. So it was 125 and 20%. It's about 145, 147, somewhere in there was the total. We haven't expended any of that. I would imagine that through the course of the negotiations moving forward, we will figure out a pay schedule, whether it would be an expected schedule and then divided by the number of months in the schedule, or if you split it into thirds, where a third to start, a third at 50%, a third on delivery. I don't know the answer to that yet. And I also don't know the accounting principle of whether or not we can carry over funds from this fiscal year into next fiscal year. I should say, if and when this process extends past the end of fiscal year 2020.
What's the charter requirement on updating the comprehensive plan? Can we get an overview of the language?
Needs to be reviewed every 5 years and updated every 5 years.
I think our last update was 3 years ago.
Yeah, the 2015 update got delayed to 2017. It was the about August, if I recall correctly, when it was finally adopted by council in 2017.
And so you're asking from us tonight what exactly, Howard, to approve, you want us to approve the contract? Because it's just council discussion to establish the direction on the recommendation.
I want your permission to allow the city manager and or his designees, plural, to begin negotiations to issue a task order to DTJ and recognize them as the preferred contractor in the process. Because of the amount of the expected award being at least 125,000, approaching 147,000. I would like the blessing of the council going into the process to understand what's involved, the dollar figures involved. We'll still come back to you with a schedule, and we'll probably show you the details of the task order itself. But I didn't want to begin the process without your blessing that you agreed with the selection committee in the finalist candidate and the process moving forward of developing what would be the schedule for performance and the expectation for payment.
Understood. Does anybody have thoughts or comments?
I just got a question. So I know Mayor Pro Tem Coach said that we addressed this 3 years ago, and that we're supposed to, I think Howard said that we are supposed to look at this every 5 years. So is that why we're starting the process here, so we can implement it in the 5th year?
The original process, I believe, the decennial comprehensive plan was completed in 2010. The 5-year update to that 2010 plan should have occurred in 2015.
But it happened in 2017.
2017. And now the plan that was written now 10 years ago and updated just under 3 years ago is out of date and was written for a city that was very different. So I'm trying to establish the expectation where we can get back to decennial plans, which are wholesale replacements, not revisions, but replacements to the plan. So every 10 years, you replace your plan with a new one. And every 5 years, you look inwardly and make minor adjustments and amendments to the decennial plans to make sure that your expectations from 5 years ago will be met 5 years in the future. So this is an effort to get the city back on schedule.
For the 10 years. Correct.
That's correct.
Yeah. Thank you for the explanation.
Councilor Shield.
And just as a reminder, the contractor for the 2010 and 2017 comprehensive plans, that was Half and Associates, correct?
No, the selected, the firm that did the 2010 plan is Mesa.
Oh, Mesa. Okay,
they're out
sorry.
in Dallas. And the update was done in-house. We
Okay.
had no third party. We expended no outside funds to complete the update.
Okay. I just wanted to, because when we say we're going to do pretty much a rewrite, I just wanted to make sure that we were indeed using a different company so that we had fresh eyes. So thank you.
I think in the assessment and just looking out for and assessing each individual contractor coming in to do this comprehensive plan, what are some of the things that we have seen with regards to land use, specifically in our original town area? I'd like some feedback on
that. You would like feedback from whom?
From our contractor, yeah.
I got you. I'm sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
I understand that comprehensive plans come in with new strategy, new design ideas, those types of things. So I think just an initial understanding of what they're thinking about with regards to the original town area.
Certainly, Mr. Mayor, Council, City Manager, I would like to just share with you that definitely there's a huge change in the way that communities get to be built today compared to 10, 15 years ago. Obviously, single-family homes have been the majority of housing development that was provided, but that has changed now, where mixed-use development and development that is more suited for younger generations, the way they like to live in environments that there's live, work, and play, as well as seniors that like to be in walkable communities. That has definitely caused many communities now to think very differently about their developments and their land use. Even the way they think about industrial. land use. Even that may be slightly different. So in all the different land uses, you do find different trends. And what we do in our plans is typically we're looking at what are the trends in society and in communities, and make sure that you are on a path where you will be in the forefront of providing for the needs of the community in the future, rather than just reacting. We see you as being proactive in preparing yourself for the new people that will come to your community and to your city. Jason, maybe you want to add maybe something to that? Jason is not available right now. So yes, so for land use, definitely, the way we will look at it today will be very different from how it was looked at 10, 15 years ago.
In what way?
Well, as I mentioned, the fact that the way that people's needs are different today, or where their expectations are different, how they entertain, how they live in communities. As I said, you have Plum Creek that was developed not long ago, and that's a type of development that more and more becomes attractive for different groups of people. So it's important to make sure that you accommodate these different needs that people have. I mentioned, the walkability, access to nature, to open space. We've learned that if you have protected open space included in your developments, that it adds a premium to your development. So the developer does better from a financial point of view, but the quality of life at the same time increases dramatically if people do have access to open space and parks and trails from their backyards. So the point being that the way that even developers think today about development is differently than many years ago, where it's truly about what quality of life can you provide for your community? How can you increase the quality of life? How can you provide those amenities that people would want to come to your community? The fact that we all can now work online, we can sometimes work from home, don't even need to go into an office, that makes us have different decisions about where we live and how we live, and the quality of life that we want to have around us where we live. It's not anymore the fact that we have to be close to our work, because we can live almost anywhere and work anywhere because we do it virtually. So this is a good example of how society and development has now started to adapt to current conditions in our world.
And Francois, one thing I would add to that, just coming from the engagement side, Francois's team and Jason's team, they're definitely going to come in with, data and best practices about how, development in cities are evolving, from how retail is evolving, how, we build cities around a car is going to definitely change over the next 10 years. They bring all that insight and knowledge. And then us from the engagement side, nobody's coming in prescribing a certain plan for Kyle. It's going to be about discovering and uncovering what makes sense for Kyle. So while at this stage, it would almost be like, prescribing before you've diagnosed, to say what we're going to do, but we'll take those best practices and then we'll engage with the public to understand what does make sense for them, because what makes sense for Kyle might not make sense for another town.
That's those words ring very loud, and that's what I was trying to get to, and I was hoping that I could bring one of you to that. I think that's critical, and that you're going to be open, and you're going to be looking at what's going to be best for Kyle, not based on the assessment of other cities and surrounding cities, because Kyle is significantly different than, say, some of our adjacent cities and municipalities, specifically in the downtown square area, where we have some historical sections that we pride ourselves in maintaining to a certain degree. So I appreciate the words with regards to being open, assessing, and meeting Kyle where Kyle's at. So I appreciate
Absolutely. You bet.
Yes, and I can absolutely echo that as well. What I described may have been what we've seen happening in other communities, but that is not what we necessarily promote. What we do is we go clean slate into a community, find out what the people in the community wants, and make sure that that gets then represented in the vision because of the values, etc., that people express and that we record. And then from the vision, then we know how to give guidelines and recommendations for the development to meet people's needs.
Councilor Ellison, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. So I want to state that I am in favor of us continuing with not only just because to meet the expectations of the charter with the comprehensive plan, but I think the document can be important. However, the document can also be another book on the shelf if we're not careful. And I think that we've seen where a document that is supposed to help guide us as far as development and all these community creation things that have been spoken about. But I mean, we had a comprehensive plan. I know it was towards the second half of the decade, but much of it was either flat out ignored or not reviewed or taken into consideration. And my concern is if we are going to spend the type of money that we're talking about spending and doing a comprehensive plan, I don't want to just push out another comprehensive plan for the sake of pushing one out. I want one that is going to not only engage community, and I appreciate the presentation from Ryan or what I'm not sure his name was, as far as the innovative ways to engage people electronically, but to drive both people and elected officials back to that document because it is something that is worthwhile going back to and is engaging and is appealing and really does set the tone and vision for what we're trying to do for our city long term.
Yeah, Francois, do you mind if I speak for a moment to that?
Please do, Ryan. Thank you.
Yeah, so two things. I mean, you're speaking my language for sure, because that's one of the things that we've seen in so many communities where it is this really expensive project that ends up being either just a PDF or a book on the shelf. Two of the things that we're doing and what we bring to the team to address that is, there's a project website that has a lot of the engagement tools, and it's kind of the hub of engagement throughout the project. But then at the end of the project, relaunching that website to where the actual plan, there's a digital version of that plan that's not just a glorified PDF online, but that is a living, breathing, interactive document that makes it easily digestible, that people don't have to, skim through 50 pages of a PDF to find something relevant to them, but the maps are interactive. They can find what they're looking for. And then the second part of it is doing so in a storytelling approach. A big part of what we do is, we do a lot of video work in documenting the process. When we do engagement, if somebody went to, 2 public meetings and participated in an online survey, that's pretty good engagement for a single individual. But there's hundreds of hours that are going to go into this project beyond just that even that very engaged person would never see. And so through video and storytelling, we're able to fully pull the curtain back and show public and elected officials and developers what actually went into this plan, and so that they can see the public engagement and the participation and really understand that we did it the right way and that it's a plan that's implementable, because a plan that's not implementable is worthless. And so using some of that storytelling of why and bringing the plan to life is really valuable.
I agree, and good point with Councilmember Ellison, and that's the reason why I'm asking the questions on engagement and how you're going to incorporate from a holistic standpoint some of the people that are maybe technology agnostic, that don't get on social media, that don't look at digital videos, and come in and want to see, touch, feel things, and they have something to say. So that you're right, we don't have a plan that's collecting dust on a shelf that we're not utilizing as a guide. So I'm really interested in seeing that and working with that. I appreciate the presentation. I think I've gotten what I wanted from it to ensure that. But yeah, you're perfectly correct, Mr. Ellison, in that we don't want that same thing to happen. So it has to be very inclusive. So I appreciate the time.
Councilmember Ellison, do you have anything you wanted to add? Are you?
Well, I think Coach had his hand up.
Well, I want to make sure you were finished with your thoughts. I was going to go to him next.
I had some more things to say, but I'll defer to the council, to Mayor Pro Tem.
Mr. Coach, go ahead.
I agree with Dex on this. The last thing I want to see is the city spend $145,000 for something that collects dust, and I think that's where the concern is. Also, to Councilmember Shield and Rizzo's question, we did the update in-house 3 years ago, the entire council and the P&Z Commission, and so I don't want to see us rush, because we certainly didn't rush with the update. And so it is pretty fresh, and there was a decent amount of time spent on that update. So it's important to me personally that I see that the comprehensive plan, that we really get something out of it for 145. Not that we're not going to do it, but that we get something out of it that truly impacts the city. I have a question for the presenters. What is the, I might have missed it, but what is the last city that you guys did a comprehensive plan for?
Mr. Mayor, Council, the last city that we worked on was the city of Terrell. And the city of Terrell is east of Dallas. And about 4 of our consultants that are on this project have been working on that particular project. So as a team, we've worked on other projects and for other cities. But the city of Terrell is a city for which we actually did the comprehensive plan, and simultaneously we did a downtown master plan. And similar to what Mr. Jason Clone said earlier, is that the fact that you and what you've done with your downtown is so recognizable and of quality. We believe that the comprehensive plan needs to also address the downtown plan as much as possible, to be integrated in the rest of the community and the city. But that's a good example to look at in terms of what is a city that we've recently completed as a team.
Is there a way for us to see that? I would like to look at some of the examples of the work in more detail before I cast my vote.
That's absolutely possible. We have a link that we can provide. It's all online available. And we can provide a link to the both the comprehensive plan as well as the downtown plan.
I yield the floor.
Other comments, questions?
Yes, so I'd want to take the temperature of the council here, because for me, I want to make sure that we are really making appropriate steps to put out a substantial project here. This council has a record of not halfway doing things, and we've got a bunch of other projects that we're doing, and we've put a lot of effort in those. And I want to make sure that we're doing the same thing with this. Now, I have been working with Howard and the P&Z appointments with this up until the just before COVID started. I'd like to continue to work on that progress. I know we kind of got stymied, but I also am not seeing the necessary rush to push something out the door right now to spend money, when we can put out a really great project if we just take our time and really wrap our heads around this, for a lack of a better phrase here right now. So I just want to caution council not to just go forward with spending this money right now if we feel like we can take a step back and maybe come up with a better vision for really what we're trying to accomplish with this comprehensive plan.
Temperature?
I think Councilmember Coach came up with a great idea. I'd like to see some work, some detail work, to see what they've done with Terrell. I think Terrell is what, just under 20,000 population?
That's about that, correct?
Yeah.
Yes.
What's the main thoroughfare? Is it 30 or 45?
80? Oh, well, yes, 20 goes through there as well, 20 and 80.
Okay.
IH 20.
Okay. What was the downtown area size? There's a little square there. I don't remember it.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's bisected by 80, which makes it a very difficult downtown to work in and to find a solution. But we came up with some novel ideas and concepts. They also have a railroad at the same time that's somewhat of a barrier parallel to 80. But I would say compared to the downtown of Kyle, it probably is a little bit bigger than the downtown of Kyle, but still it's very comparable, I would say. What I also would like to add, Mr. Mayor, Council, is that the whole idea with a comprehensive plan is to set the vision for the future. And the way we do and look at a vision is that it's all based on people's values. What are important to them, their families, what are important to the business community, what is important to the residents and the ISDs and the different stakeholders. And once we've determined and learn about the values that people have expressed, we take those values and we then translate that into a vision. And what I've learned is that the visioning process is extremely important because, you know, as many people there are tonight in this virtual room that we have, so many ideas are there to apply and look for the future for your community. But it's to take all those ideas and to see what are the commonalities, what are the common values that people hold dearly, and then use that to develop one vision. If you have one vision, out of that vision, I believe, and our approach is, you then develop and put together the actions. And your actions need to be focused on that vision. I also have a strong belief in you must find the 3 to 5 main action items. I call them often the catalyst action items. That if you focus on those, get them to be implemented, they will have a catalytic effect whereby other ideas and other actions will almost automatically come to play. Because you've set the tone, you've set the stage, you've set the route for this to go forward, this particular action item. And then that then leads to other action items to almost automatically fall in place. So our approach is from many ideas, one vision, and out of one vision, those action items that move your city forward and implement the vision. You don't want just to have a vision without implementation. You want to have it there and have good guidance with phasing, with priorities in terms of how do we implement this plan or how do we implement this vision rather with action items that gets us where we want to be.
Councilman Rizo.
Thank you for your presentation. And one of the things I liked is that you incorporate everybody's thoughts in the community and even the business, the small business. I definitely want their input as well in this. One of the things I want to see with this document, so it doesn't end up on the shelf, is that it's clear and precise, not open to misinterpretation. So that's one of the things I really want to see, because I know with our last document, sometimes people read it differently. I want to make sure that we can see this document and know exactly how to follow it.
A very good point, Mr. Mayor, Council. Again, we strongly believe in a document that's user-friendly, has no jargon, has terms and explanations in a simple way that people understand what it is, and there's no doubt about it. So yeah, we focus on our documents to be very clear, very concise, but simple, and not difficult to follow, not difficult to understand. We make it a goal of us to make sure that that document can be understood by the majority of people in your community.
Thank you.
And one thing I would just add, because I definitely agree. I mean, that you never want to rush into something until you have a strong vision. But as Francois mentioned, this process is about uncovering what that vision is. And so, it's kind of a cliche saying, but, the best time to start engaging your citizens and the public is yesterday. The second best time to start doing that is today or tomorrow. And so while I absolutely agree, you don't want to rush into it to just rush into it, or because it happens to be on an agenda. But I do think, it's a super important thing. And starting that process of engaging the public has so many other beneficial effects to the community to show that the city is listening to its residents.
I would like to ask Jason. Jason, are you available? Can you talk right now? Jason?
Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can hear. What I want to ask you, Jason, is you know the city from the work that you've done. You understand the market. You understand the economy of Kyle.
Yeah, this is Pervez. If your number has changed, please let me know. I've left a couple of messages and called you, but I don't seem to get your attention on this one. It's pretty important that you check your email, and those people that are coming into work tomorrow, please get hold of them tonight. I'd appreciate it.
Sounds like we've got distraction. Go ahead, Francois.
So, Jason, what I would like for you to just share a little bit about, from your experience and what's happening and has happened in Kyle, say for the last number of years that you've been involved with, what have you seen and what do you think is essential to consider in terms of moving forward with regards to being ready for once COVID-19 is going to change, to end, and development and the economy is going to flow again strongly. Share a few thoughts and ideas that you may have about Kyle to position itself to move forward in the best possible position with a good plan in place that will take them there. Some of your thoughts about that, Jason.
Yeah, I'll first say that, and Ryan, I'm so glad you're on the team. I think, part of this process needs to be, discovering what those answers are, but I won't sort of shy away from answering your question either. So obviously the city of Kyle has grown exponentially in terms of its residential development. Primarily most of the residential development consists of 2 or 3 lot types and patterns because it starts to become consistent and predictable from the developer standpoint. And so, looking at what are the housing opportunities, what is the missing middle? There's not a lot of luxury housing. Affordability is an issue, everywhere. I know that there's obviously a push to create better, stronger neighborhoods that are more resilient with mixed housing. It's a little bit more difficult to do and probably a little bit more challenging from a developer standpoint. But one thing that would keep me up at night is there's a lot of expenditures in terms of the infrastructure and infrastructure maintenance. And there's fewer and fewer limited amount of what I would consider choice development sites, certainly protecting the I-35 corridor. I'm excited to see developments like Plum Creek continue to sort of densify and deliver quality development with a developer that has very strong values and wants to uphold standards in Kyle. But that protection is not in place everywhere. And so I think we've got to really look at what are the remaining tracks, what is the true vision, how to optimize the development, obviously through the eyes and the values of the citizens and the staff. But, ultimately, I think, looking at, how those patterns should grow and really finding opportunities to sort of sand off the corners of some of the remaining tracks to make sure that they're developed in a way that align and is calibrated with the current market. We're having a lot of conversations in terms of market adjustments and COVID and sustainability and resiliency, and that's vocabulary that didn't exist, at least in my world, 3 months ago. And so I think, and we know while sales tax were up last month, we're anticipating that, Kyle and many others may experience a slight dip, and we want to make sure that from an economic standpoint, that the economic development strategy and the land use strategy are aligned to mitigate future impacts as well.
Well, thank you for that, Jason. I appreciate that. So what is also very, very important to recognize is the fact that now is a good time to plan, because as we prepare ourselves getting out of our situation right now, the better plan we have at hand, the better we can move forward and get the vision that gets to be established to implement as we move forward.
And there's certain just standard principles like, increased, walkability and design standards that may make sense. And so I think the key is exploring those opportunities to make sure that future developments are not only more resilient, but essentially planned to accommodate, maybe future issues like we're discovering right now.
That's a good point, because as COVID-19 has impacted all of our lives, in our industry, there's so much talk about how urban design, urban planning, architecture will change. Even thinking about the fact that people will often be more home than at work now, and many communities and companies really will see the opportunity to have some of their employees rather at home than at the office. That means that architecture will start to change, make provision for that workspace that is necessary, or that informal space that becomes available for different users, different times of the day. We've also learned that access to open space and to a close-by park has become important to people. Having an opportunity to access a trail nearby, to get exercise, to be out there when we still have to have some distancing between us, is so valuable. What we've seen being done almost organically in many communities. It teaches you about how people live and how they recreate and communicate with each other. So those principles and ideas we think is very valuable in thinking about as we think about the future of Kyle, because these principles are definitely also applicable to a place like Kyle, like any other city as well, whether it's a big city or a small city. Those principles do stay in place.
Any more questions, comments? I'll say for myself, I'm on the fence. The 2010 comprehensive plan is a document that I've gone through pretty extensively because I was a part of the team that was on the council when we did our revisions. The document that comes through, the part of the comprehensive plan that the council interfaces with the most is the land use map and zoning questions. And clarity there is really just a matter of council will, because we went through and worked over that plan for several days in a row. I think there's a lot of value in the stormwater plan that we're working on, which is attached by reference to the comprehensive plan. There's a lot of value to our transportation plan, which we amend on the regular as projects come into shape that make sense, that where we need to make sure our arterial roads are connected. But the comprehensive plan that we currently have that was created in 2010 has a lot of vision for the city of Kyle. It's pretty well laid out. The charter, to be clear, says two things. 2 years after the establishment of the home rule city, so in 2002, we had to hire a consultant to develop our first master comprehensive plan. And then every 5 years, we need to update it. And it speaks nothing of complete rewrites every 10 years. And so for me, I'm looking for a compelling reason to rewrite this thing and to spend the money. I do believe that if we're going to spend the money, it sounds like this group obviously would be a good selection, but I don't see the value just yet because I'm obviously very aware that this council in particular has a very clear vision for the city and is moving forward with a lot of projects. We also don't have really a clear sense just yet of what the future is going to hold. And I'm not sure that until such a time as we're on the other side of COVID-19 and have a clearer sense of what life is going to be like after this, that it would be possible to put together a long-term plan that takes into account what we're experiencing currently. So, I mean, for those reasons and for the fact that we are pretty well locked in on the areas we're trying to develop, our wastewater treatment plant, all these things are mentioned in the comprehensive plan as elements we need to have. And I was reading through the list, and there's not one area that the charter calls out that we need to focus on that we are not focusing on at a very high level. So for me, I'm fine to wait on this or to consider doing another revision, perhaps bringing in a consultant to help us with a revision to keep it cheaper. But I'm just personally not that interested in spending the money to completely rewrite it. I don't have it. I haven't had a compelling case made for what value the residents would get for that money and that investment right now. Because any land use issue, any development issue, we pretty much take that head on, and our staff is constantly updating the way all of these projects connect. So, I mean, I will go out there and say for myself, I would prefer to postpone and wait for a while before we do a major rewrite until things are clear, or like I was saying, if we want to moving forward in more of a revision way on a smaller scale, using a consultant to help us, perhaps, but not a consultant to hold our hands and completely recreate a plan that's already pretty good. Any zoning land use issues for clarity's sake that we want to take up, whether it's zoning downtown, proposals for special districts downtown, anything with regards to noise, light, pollution, streetscapes, landscaping, all of those things we are fully capable of taking on and are taking on, probably to some staff's chagrin because it's such a heavy lift, the amount of projects that we are currently working on that I would call this city's comprehensive plan that this council is working on so diligently. So my recommendation is to wait. But I completely understand the desire to spend the resources, engage the community, and rewrite the plan. I don't think that it's compelled for us, that we are compelled in any way to do so by the charter. So for me, it's just cash that we would spend relative to the value, and I don't see the value in it right now. But that's just my opinion. I do think we owe it to our planning department, our planning and zoning commission, and the applicants who have come forward to give them some clear direction. And if we want to wait until we have time to review their work, I'm totally okay with that, and we can bring this up and have the discussion down the road. But for myself, that's not something I need. I'm fairly clear on whether this project, if it was up to me, I would move it forward. Councilor Shield.
I disagree in a couple of aspects. Just, first of all, the 2010, our census was what, 15?
2010 it was 28,000.
28,000, so we've almost doubled. And the amount of population that's come in has a whole different mindset of what the people in our city who lived in 2010 had. And there may be other expectations or wants or just overall, as I said, expectations of what they want the city to look like. And I think we need to take that into account. And if the charter recommends it, then we should do it. Because the other thing that we always get every time we try to change something, well, the comprehensive plan doesn't say that. And I know the comprehensive plan is a guideline. But if we have something in writing that's very put forth clear and legible, that we have something that we can say, it is in the comprehensive plan, we can go with this, and this is what was decided by the citizens of Kyle with their input.
Well, I have feedback on that, if y'all are okay. I'd very much like to give feedback on.
I know where you're going with that, and I can appreciate that.
So your thoughts are not lost on me. But that said, number one, we could get a $140,000 project to deliver to the residents, something of meaningful. Because right now, what this proposal would do would take that dollars, would go through a public process and create a document very similar to the one that we currently have. The document that we currently have has areas in it where we disagree from time to time as a body with regards to downtown or some of the overall vision. But it's not because the document is not clear. It's just because there's a lack of clarity in the community and in those who elect us, and there's some tension. Are we a pro-roundabout or an anti-roundabout city? I did a survey, got about, I don't know, over 1,000 responses, 51 to 49%. The comprehensive plan can say something about roundabouts and whether or not they are preferred, and we can take a vote, and it can be a 3-4 vote or a 4-3 vote, and it can get codified. But 2 years later, when a roundabout proposal comes up and the 49% that don't want it show up, we have a political decision to make, and the comprehensive plan isn't going to help us there. Same with downtown. It can say CBD2 is recommended. We've gone through this incredible public process, and it still becomes controversial. And I don't think that any comprehensive plan is ever going to be able to take that off of the shoulders of the city council, because we're always going to have to be the group that makes that hard decision in front of the residents who are going to be affected as it relates to zoning. If there was something in the comprehensive plan that was proposed that we weren't thinking about, that we had the ability to fund, that would be one of those catalysts, game-changing projects, if I thought that we were in need of some of that right now, I would have a completely different tone. I mean, that's the truth. If I thought that this group could bring value to the table to be that catalyst to help us really like open our eyes, open up our minds and our wallets such that we could have that kind of an impact on the city, I would be more supportive. But I don't think that we suffer from a lack of vision or clarity in that way. So I don't know what we're actually getting for the value, because the comprehensive plan, as it currently states, is being used about as it's supposed to be, which is to say there are land uses that have a certain window of allowable zonings that we're supposed to take into consideration, which generally we do, but we don't always. But that is very much what we went fine-tooth comb through 3 years ago. And we are, this body in particular, is fully capable with our Planning and Zoning Commission of workshopping that again, spending some money, hiring this crew to come in and help us with it, to go through and redo that land use plan or any section of it that we want. The charter does not compel us to rewrite the comprehensive plan. The 5-year review is all that it mentions, and it says get together with P&Z, work out, make some revisions if you need. It should be a living document. I need the compelling case to be made of how, after spending $140,000, the future of the city of Kyle will be any different. Because the only thing I know will happen is that we will have $140,000 out of our checking account. And I don't know what it's going to translate to in terms of benefits to the residents. I like the interactivity of those modules, but I don't see how putting the interactive spots on where we want sidewalks is going to help us, because we got sidewalk problems, we know what they are, and we're working on them. And whether the residents want more sidewalks or want their sidewalks to be fixed or more lights or more walkability, I mean, we're doing absolutely everything we can in all those fronts right now, making changes. I feel like we as a body could write the comprehensive plan, and it would be so synced up with the vision for the city of Kyle that it would be hard for a consultant to compete with our collective vision that we have for the city right now. Just my thoughts.
Well, I can say I agree with those thoughts, and I think that's the reason for the questions. I'm kind of coming to that consensus, but at the same time, it's the will of the council, and
right.
Just trying to get that conversation going so people can bring some input on it. I think you grab a great point on value in timing and where we're at right now. Our engagement with overall development right now. We've got quite a few projects going on. I think your idea spot on is to come back and do some updates when we need them. We go from there. I mean, we've done quite a few assessments. Let's get to using them, and let's have this discourse, and let's debate them over council, and we'll come to a consensus and we'll support each other into that direction. But I don't see the value in it right now either.
I know for me, something you touched on was the uncertainty. We don't know what the future holds for us right now with COVID-19. We still haven't seen if there's going to be foreclosures or we're going to fall in the tax rate. But I can tell you that, yeah, when I first saw this, it kind of worried me about spending this type of money on something like this at this time, because I worry about public engagement. I know they did a great piece on, how to reach the public, but there is this portion of our society that isn't tech savvy, and with COVID-19, are they going to be opening the doors for us? Are they going to allow these people to come in and talk to them? So, I have some reservations on this as well.
If there's no other comments, I'd like to make a motion. I'd like to make a motion to give staff direction to forego pursuit of this vendor for the contract for the comprehensive plan, and instead bring back a proposal to council that includes the process for going through a revision similar to what we did in 2017, that includes at a minimum one Saturday morning workshop with the Planning and Zoning Commission.
A second.
It's been motioned by the mayor, seconded by Councilmember Villalobos. Is there any further discussion? Was that a clear enough motion, Howard?
Yeah, sounds great. Appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Howard. You seem thrilled. I appreciate it, sir. I think that for me, I think that it's important, though, that we still have some kind of, it is important to do some kind of engagement to get input on the comprehensive plan. I'm certainly not advocating for us not to do any sort of comprehensive plan. And I don't think that that's what you're stating either. No. I'm just saying that I think we could really hammer something out that's to the level of what we've been doing with this particular council. And I just don't want to get ahead of our skis and do something because we feel like that's, we need to get this done. That's been more my concern.
Any further comments?
I concur with several members of the council. I'm not saying that we shouldn't have a comprehensive plan. We shouldn't work towards updates, however they may be. But, one of the examples was given was best practices and green space. And I would venture to say that this council is laser focused in a lot of those areas, especially green space right now. So I think it's more prudent for us to wait and see and do some planning with P&Z right now and then move forward from there.
Any further discussion? We'll do a roll call vote.
Mitchell,
Aye.
Ellison,
Aye.
Shield,
Aye.
Villalobos,
Aye.
Tobias,
Aye.
Coach,
Aye.
Rizo.
Aye.
All right, motion passes 7-0. We have a couple more items. Y'all want to power through them, or do you want to take a 10-minute break? I need just restroom.
Please.
All right, we're gonna take a small break. We'll reconvene at 9:10. It's been moved by the mayor, seconded by Councilmember Rizzo. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, motion carries 7-0. Next up, agenda item number 27, an ordinance of the City of Kyle, Texas, amending certain provisions of the Kyle Code of Ordinances, Chapter 11, Business Regulations, by amending and adding provisions in Article 9, Commercial Towing and Wrecker Services, to clarify requirements relating to certificates, solicitations, qualifications, vehicle storage facilities, etc. Chief Barnett.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. For the record, Jeff Barnett, Chief of Police. To keep it very short, we're bringing this ordinance before you tonight to allow your consideration to let vehicle storage facilities, which are the places where wrecker businesses store their towed vehicles, to be extended into the ETJ. The City of Kyle has regulated wrecker businesses that want to participate on the voluntary rotational system that is governed by the police department for what we call non-consensual tows, non-consent vehicle tows. That can be from things such as accidents or an arrest or a vehicle that has become disabled in the roadway and it's a danger to other motorists. So for the last several years, we've had two separate sections in our ordinance, specifically Article 7 entitled Towing Services and Article 9 entitled Commercial Towing and Wrecker Services on the books. They were somewhat complementary of each other, sometimes overlapping and sometimes duplicating. And we had a request from a former wrecker business that was once on rotation and is considering rejoining our rotation list. They brought forth their request for the council to extend the allowance of the vehicle storage facility, thus their business, to be located in the ETJ. Currently, and in prior months and years, that requirement has restricted them to operate within the city limits and operate their vehicle storage facility within the city limits. At the same time that our legal department was drafting the revision for your review, they opted to basically combine the components of Article 6, I believe it is, Article 6, Towing Services, hope I said that correct, ago, with Article 9, so that we could have all of our towing service codes in one place. So they basically put the two together so it'll be more convenient for staff and citizens. And then really the only substantive change is to allow those VSFs into ETJ. There are some minor clarifications on the wording and corrections for updated state laws, but those are pretty much just either grammar changes or just clarification issues. So if you would like to consider extending the VSF opportunities into the city's ETJ, that's what's really before you, other than repealing the Section 6 towing services in Chapter 11 and then amending the existing Chapter 9 commercial towing and wrecker services.
Okay, thanks, Chief. We have a couple interested parties here who would like to come and speak on the proposal. First up is going to be Garrison Maurer.
Good evening, City Council. Thanks for your time here. I'm one of the ones that suggested this change to ETJ and give us more flexibility to be close to the city of Kyle. You know, and when I first started the towing up here in Kyle, actually it was they had no regulation where to be a yard, and they let us use our yard at San Marcos. So we've been here a while towing, you know, Hayes County. We're on the city of San Marcos and Hayes County, and we were in Kyle before. So this would be a positive change for us, to more flexible to put our locations. So because the city of citizens don't want junkyards in the city, and it's not beneficial for the city to have the junkyards, you know, around the town. So if we move it to the ETJ, I think it'd work out for everybody. And another thing I was going to suggest is, I don't know why the semi 18-wheelers are not involved, but we had a discussion before to make a requirement. Like right now, you can have an 18-wheeler from Austin have to come in. There's no regulation on where they take them to. They could take them. They could take them back to Austin, or they could take them to San Antonio. There's no regulation. So I would, if I'm gonna invest, in Kyle, I'd like to have that where you get the local companies, to keep the 18-wheelers in Kyle, or either ETJ. So but that's for y'all to consider, because there's like 3 or 4 companies that have 18-wheelers in Kyle now. So I don't know why they're letting them go to Austin. So that's just something to think about.
Chief, do you have thoughts on that?
I do. I can address that. So at the time the ordinance was redrafted and updated several years ago, we weren't sure how many heavy-duty wreckers, we typically call them, the larger wreckers that would tow an 18-wheeler or very heavy wrecked vehicles. We weren't sure how many of those we were going to have that would desire to participate on our rotation list. And obviously, we need to have access to several of those for when we have multiple accidents or when there's bad weather and there's accidents all along Interstate 35. So I think the council at that time didn't want to set such a restriction and limit the number of heavy-duty wreckers, the commercial wreckers, that might want to join our rotation. The other side of that is what we call the regular wrecker or traditional wrecker service, which is your lighter weight vehicles. Those are the ones that are required to have their VSF inside the city limits. Currently, we have 4 of those wrecker businesses on our rotation. And currently, we have 2 heavy-duty wrecker companies that are on our rotation. But the purpose was just to make sure that we had enough heavy-duty wreckers that desired to be on our rotation several years ago.
Yeah, and then to add on to that, if you do need additional, you could have a separate list, like a backup list. Say you call the companies in Kyle first, and you exhausted these guys, and so you outsource it to. Then you have this other list that's out of town. So that would be if you Kyle wreckers, there's 3 or 4 18-wheelers at the same time. You could go to Austin or whatever.
I'm looking for a recommendation, Chief.
Yeah, I would suggest let us research that some more. That's a pretty binding restriction if we were to make it now without any research to see if other record companies would be amenable to his suggestion.
Yeah.
So my recommendation at this point would be not to address that part and leave our heavy-duty wrecker, our commercial wrecker section alone, and let us do some research and perhaps bring that back in the future with input from our businesses.
Yeah, that sounds fair.
Okay.
I just want to be fair.
Chief, how does that apply? Can you put that in action on with regards to service? Because they provide a critical service, right? So I just want to know, what does that mean to you in functionality from law enforcement's perspective? Having them in the ETJ, having multiple organizations to service in case there is a multiple wrecks on I-35, because it's happened before. Those issues are increasing. So what is that? How does that apply to you in an overall operational plan?
So there are a couple of situations that really impact our operations when we need wrecker services. One is inclement weather. If there are a variety of accidents in Hays County and in our neighboring counties, there are oftentimes multiple wrecker companies involved in multiple calls across the area. So we want to make sure that we have enough wrecker companies on rotation so that we have enough supply when the demand is there. Another part to that is the response time. We want to make sure that we have wreckers that are immediately available to respond and to include multiple companies when we have a large scale accident. We've had some accidents where there's 4 and 5 vehicles involved, especially on the interstate. And there are times when we may exhaust the immediate resources of several wrecker companies. So our goal has never been to limit wrecker companies. We enjoy having multiple companies so that we have an availability of wreckers at our immediate disposal. Oftentimes, when we have very severe accidents, we may have individuals that are entrapped in a vehicle, several right here on the interstate over the last several years, and the department may occasionally use the assistance of a wrecker company. So their immediate response, which is required by our ordinance, they have a 20-minute response time, is also important to us so that we can make sure that they're available to assist the fire department in rescuing people that are entrapped in a vehicle. The direction of travel, if accidents happen on the interstate, can sometimes have an impact. If you can imagine rush hour and an accident that is in the northbound lanes of the city, Likewise, the same thing in the rush hour in the morning, northbound in the morning and southbound in the afternoons. The wrecker company is coming from that same direction and caught up in traffic. Sometimes it helps that we have wrecker units available from other parts of the city. Whether they're in the ETJ or not, there's not any significant impact to the police department. I know our ETJ boundaries have just extended a short distance with our population. However, the PD didn't really have a negative stance if they're out in the ETJ, as long as they're accessible and they follow all of the state guidelines and they follow all of the applicable city ordinances, regulations that are before you tonight.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
All right, next up, I'm going to bring up Rodrigo Amaya.
Thank you, member. Thank you, Mayor, council members. My name is Rodrigo Amaya for the record. I'd like to say thank you to the chief for getting involved in this and to all of you on the dais. I was a record driver about 5 years ago. Before that, I was officer, so I've seen both sides. A little bit of history. When I was working on this, started working as a record driver, I was talking to some of the commissioners of Hays County because the ordinance kept coming up for discussion. After the gavel was down and they approved it, I went back a couple months later when I noticed some changes because of those policy changes, and I asked some of those commissioners if they understood what they signed off on. Sadly, they said no. Well, I got to see what they did by doing that. Okay, a lot of people were losing their cars and stuff like that because of certain things that were done. So this is a very complicated business, but it's a very, very important and essential business. You know, I was in one of those scenarios where there was a fatality on Yarrington Road and two 18-wheelers here, and in the middle was an off-duty APD officer, and I was out there. I believe several, I'm not sure if Mr. Hendricks or one of those city officials was out there too, so they got to see it firsthand too. This right here is very beneficial to everybody. The ETJ is going to open it up to more companies, so because it's very limited to real estate in Kyle. A lot of companies are going to come in right now. One of the things I remember when this first came up was that folks were getting arrested or their cars were being towed, and they were being sent out to Austin and other places in San Marcos. So citizens were having to go chase down their cars. So the reason they started talking about this was to make sure that it stayed here, and that's what this recommendation is doing. So for you to have big 18-wheelers in the area, ETJs now, if approved, I hope you do and are supportive, you're going to have companies that are going to be able to come here, because right now you have folks coming in from Austin. They can come from anywhere, and then you have to go look and track it down wherever they're at, and that's very hard, you know. So this will help out everybody involved. I myself am very supportive, not just from a record driver side, but also law enforcement and to the citizens involved in all this, because it's a big inconvenience to try to track where's your stuff at, if it's in Houston or anywhere like that, you know. I've been kind of involved with this stuff in 4 counties right now. So one of the reasons I do that is to compare what's working and what's not. I can tell you right now, Comal County has an exceptional policy where the relationship between the police departments and the record owners and companies, it is awesome. These guys work as a team, you know. One of the worst places that I've kind of experienced, sadly, is Hays County. So I've been trying real hard to find out where the problems are and encourage change. So tonight, I hope y'all support this, and thank you for y'all's time.
Thank you, Rodrigo. Any questions for Chief or comments? Questions for Garrison or Rodrigo?
I think I've got one for either James or Mr. Sellers. So if we move this to the ETJ, what regulations do we have on the yards themselves? What I'm worried about is the aesthetics around it. I know because we've rented to a couple of record yards there in Austin, our company has, and we make them the city of Austin makes them put up like fencing, metal fencing all the way around. One thing, it keeps it safe, it keeps it from everybody seeing the vehicles and stuff like that. So I was just wondering, with it being out in the ETJ, do we have any kind of regulations like that in place?
James, you want to hit that?
Mayor, council, and our virtual audience. For the record, James Earp, Assistant City Manager.
Councilmember Rizo, probably the biggest risk of ETJ is use and future use. So outside of the city limits, the city does not have control or authority on land use. So that means in the normal process of establishing a record yard or whatever you want to call these facilities, these record facilities. In the normal course of doing that, you'd be inside the city limits, you'd go through some sort of a public process in order to have the property properly zoned or to buy property that was already zoned and identified for that type of a use. And then you would be able to establish that use there, following the development guidelines and standards within the city and of course this ordinance. In the ETJ, there are no development standard requirements that the city has or the authority to have those requirements inside the ETJ. So there's really no public process for a neighbor who may not appreciate the idea of having a record yard put next to them. There's really no recourse for those types of folks. That is the risk of doing it that way. The secondary risk is creep. So a piece of property may be able to have, and Paige is on the call, or she's on, so she can talk to the legalities of grandfathering uses. But should the property in the future come into the city limits under whatever type of an agreement or annexation deal, the use that's established on the property could be considered grandfathered for the remainder of the property. So if they buy a big piece of property and they just have a little bitty yard up front, in theory, they could continue to expand that footprint with grandfathering, regardless of any type of zoning or whatnot in the future. So that's the risk. If you're asking about what the risk of the ETJ is, that's the risk.
Thank you, James.
Yeah, I think we have to, this is a service to the community. Ultimately, the person who pays it at the end of the day is the citizen. So we have to give varying opportunities for them to kind of mitigate cost anyways. I know some of this stuff is regulated, but I think having more from a business perspective, having something that's cost effective for them to have as well is also something that we have to consider from a business perspective. They're small business owners and they're providing a service. And the more we tax them, the more it translates over to the citizen. So, but again, most of the ones that I've worked with in the past are fairly considerate with people that are around them. Obviously, there's always going to be one or two that we'll have to kind of guide, and I think that's something that we have to address at some point. But at the same time, we need, and I don't quite understand. There's a restriction now that's supposed to limit the number that we have in certain areas and regions. Am I correct, Chief?
No, the only restriction that they have now, and notwithstanding any building codes, because that may be in somebody else's,
Okay.
Mr. Erb, review a little bit better, but it was never designed to do that. It was only designed to keep them within the city.
Okay.
And I recall the council discussions several years ago, and there were about 5 major topics that they discussed. Some were exactly what you're talking about there. Council is talking about. It is the quality of the business and the quality of the neighborhoods and the aesthetics and all that. There were some other comments made years ago about the distance that a citizen might have to travel to retrieve their vehicle if it were picked up at an accident scene. Maybe they were transported to the hospital and later on got out and they went to go pick it up. Or maybe they were arrested. They commented that they did not want them to drive too terribly far to retrieve their vehicle. And then I remember there were some very limited conversation about taxes and keeping certain tax dollars in the city, since this is an opportunity that they get for participating on our rotational list. Those were the things that came up. Well, and one last one, they didn't want the police officers who often go back to the vehicle storage facilities after an accident, perhaps to get more information or take pictures of the vehicle. They didn't want the officers to have to travel too far in the course of their duties and take them too far outside of the city limits. Those were the points of discussion back then.
And I guess my question now is a follow-up for Mr. Garrison or Mr. Rodrigo Amaya. If you can answer this, how does implementing what we have here kind of create a balance or an opportunity for you guys as far as operations? Can you answer that?
It seems to me that that the in-city groups have a kind of a monopoly. I think that's what it ultimately
Give the city more
is doing.
options. 'Cause right now, you don't have any options. You only got 3 people. And one of the people, I don't know how he got signed off on a property that's inside the city, but the city, Coons, there's 3 departments that had to sign off on this towing company. And one of them jumped in the city about 3 months ago, and somehow they say it's grandfathered, but there's never been a towing yard at that property, but somehow Coons said it's grandfathered.
Okay.
And how do you grandfather a company if there's never been a company there before?
Well, I remember that.
The property don't even have a junkyard, and they said it's grandfathered. How convenient, but this would be a lot, this change here, open up, get more companies.
And then more convenience for people like me when
Yeah,
they're,
the police department, you still have, you don't have to go very far, it's still in the city, it's still in the outskirts of the city. And, you just can't put it next to somebody's house.
Right.
You still have to be a commercial property. You have properties, homeowner associations, and, somebody don't like you go to court, they can sue you if an inconvenience. So, they still have those avenues to pursue. If they don't like you in the ETJ, if you don't like where your yard is at, but, a lot of these, I went driving the other day up a high road and all that, and you have property, you have dump trucks, they have neighborhoods, they had dump trucks, gravel trucks, and they all seem to be getting along. It's not a problem with them. All we would do is probably go next door to one of those yards that have all the dump trucks, or they have some of the guys that have a mechanic yard and backyard. There's a bunch of those up in, BB Road and all that, so we just want,
right,
we're not gonna inconvenience anybody.
Right.
We're gonna provide valuable service
Sure.
to the city of Kyle.
I've had to go to Austin or Travis County to pick up a vehicle that my family was involved in a wreck before. So I know what the inconvenience is. And I've also been in a situation where you've had a citizen very upset having to track down a vehicle that wound up being far, far away outside of this county as a result of. So I know what that does from a law enforcement standpoint, and I know what that does personally.
So this is not gonna change a whole lot of stuff. It's just gonna be more flexibility.
Okay.
And you're not gonna have a whole lot of people coming in, because the real estate up here, even in ETJs, costs a lot of money.
Sure.
So it's not gonna be a swarm of wreckers. It might be 1 or 2 companies that might come in
Sure.
the ETJ, Maybe these city guys downtown, like Pete's Towing down here, he has a yard downtown. There's no fencing around his yard to where you can see straight through the yard. And all the companies are the same. They don't have no above high standards where you can't see through. They have all their yards, you can see through the yards. And so we wouldn't be no different. We'd just say, or if y'all want to put something in there to say, we can put that in there too. Y'all can do whatever you want, but we want to work together.
Thank you.
You can do whatever y'all want to do.
Thank you.
So.
Thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that you want to work with us. That's great. Thank you.
Yeah, I'd like to reiterate one thing that they said. We definitely consider our towing companies, our record businesses as important partners in providing public safety service. So we view them as on the same team, and we appreciate their help when they respond. And they help get our accidents and other vehicles out of the way quickly and safely, as well as they remove the debris from the roadway so that our roadways can be opened up quickly. They're definitely important partners in our community.
We do a lot of stuff for free because a lot of stuff we don't get paid for.
Right.
So,
You leave them at the yard.
Chief, your recommendation is to approve. You think this is good for the police department as well as overall service delivery to those who are affected by and need towing services?
Yes, sir. We don't have any problem with it whatsoever.
I'd like to make a motion to approve agenda item number 27.
Second.
It's been moved by the mayor, seconded by Councilmember Villalobos. Is there any further discussion?
Mayor?
No.
If I can, I want to make sure Councilmember Rizzo's question was answered about the requirements in the ETJ. The city doesn't have necessarily the teeth in the ETJ that we would in the city limits, but this is still permitted through TDLR. So there are requirements through the state for fencing, for all-weather parking surfaces, for lighting, et cetera. So even though we don't have that ability, it is regulated through TDLR, and they will have those.
And my concern on that was, because I know sometimes there's impound vehicles that, I don't know if they still do this back in the day. Anytime there was a crime or something, those vehicles were towed, impounded, and they had to be in a secure lot.
They do.
And that's why I was making sure we still have those secure lots
Yes.
in place.
That's a state requirement.
They use the thing across the road for the homicide vehicles, what's it,
Public Works.
Yeah, we towed a vehicle for the city, the head gun, the guy, we towed it to human resources.
Public Works.
Appreciate it, thank you.
Thank you.
Any further comments?
I just wanted to just reiterate what the Council Villalobos was saying. A lot of it has to do with accessibility to the vehicle, which is good because I can imagine some of the accidents, Chief Barnett, that happen out here on the highway, that some of these people are from out of state or out of town. And these cars get towed to Southside or in Austin or all the way to East Del Valley area or wherever there's a available record. So I think it has to do with accessibility to make sure that the cars at least stay in the city, I guess, where the accident happened for insurance purposes, for in case you have to have an adjuster that needs to come out. So I can imagine how hard it would be to try to track down your car, especially when you just got out of the hospital and so forth. And it keeps it all unified in one area to where it'll just, if it happened in the city, the way I look at it, it should be housed in the same area as well.
I agree. Thank you. Thank you all. I think we have a good perspective on this. Anyone else? All those in favor say aye.
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 All opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Do you want this to come back for a second reading to give you a chance to have those conversations with the police department? Or do you want this to be finally passed?
No.
It's a first and a second reading, so we have a full 7 council members here, meaning that we can pass it on first reading and then it's done. And if you're going to have additional revisions, you'll have to start the process over. But by law, we can allow for it to come back for a second reading at the next council meeting. And if you can work something out with the chief between now and then, it can be incorporated into that second reading.
Because
So you want it finally passed now? Garrison, finally passed? All right, so if there's no.
but Chief mentioned that he wanted to look into the heavy,
That's what I'm asking them about.
yeah, so
Right.
I guess I'm asking Chief more so than just these gentlemen.
Did Mayor Pro Tem, do you object, you said?
Yeah,
All right,
let's-
that's fine. It'll
let's
come
go
back.
to second reading.
Yeah.
It'll go to second reading then. It'll come back at the next meeting as written, and you'll have a chance to have those conversations, as Councilor Shields saying. All right, next up, agenda item number 28, discussion and possible action regarding no parking and fire lane painting standards. This is not intended to be an exhaustive conversation. I'm hoping. What?
Speaking of towing,
It's about no parking and
Speaking of
road-
towing.
and fire lane print, come on.
Matt, do you have my image? I'm just going to ignore all this noise.
Roll that beautiful curb footage.
Oh, my gosh.
Well, I can probably just distill it down into a couple things. Number one is about a year ago, we installed no parking at Sanders in Plum Creek, which has been, by all accounts, a phenomenal success. The traffic moving through Sanders at where we did the no parking is flowing better than ever. Something honestly I'm extremely proud of to have gotten that done. It's really weird, but I just very happy with that. That said, some of the discussions around whether or not to put up the signage and then the decision to put up the no parking fire lanes really opened my eyes to the value of the fire lane paint as it relates to compliance. we have a lot of discussions within the community about people parking too close to intersections, too close to stop signs, too close to fire hydrants, and just in general, no parking areas. And that is in part, I think, because the signs that we erect for no parking just generally don't convey the message strongly enough. And the red paint conveys it perfectly strong and gets a much higher degree of compliance. It also looks good when it's painted well. But Harper and Public Works did comment that they're kind of cumbersome to try to maintain, and there's different agreements between different subdivisions as to the no parking spots signs and who paints and who maintains them. We just don't have any uniform standards in terms of what we expect of our subdivisions to maintain it themselves, and what we expect of the streets that we maintain for keeping the no parking stripes looking good. We have a lot of new development in town, and when you go to the new developments, one of the first things that you notice is the really crisp, bright, red no parking signs. And I can't help but think that over time, that those they're all going to just fade to yellowish pink, where you can barely read it anymore. And just generally be decayed. And I don't think we should paint things that we don't intend to maintain. And I don't think we should require painting if we don't intend to maintain it. So in my opinion, this is a good candidate for establishing a standard, as we've been really noodling over this idea of standards of excellence in the community. It wouldn't take too much work, I don't think, for us to do an assessment of the overall fire lanes and no parking lanes in the city, and to try to determine what standard or how often they need to be painted, and just go ahead and commit to doing that as a city, and not as a first resort trying to pass the buck to someone else. It's just like the sidewalk conversation. You ask homeowners to maintain their own sidewalks. Maybe some of them do, but a lot of them don't. And then you're left with the decision of, do you want to let them deteriorate, or do you want to take that on, own it, and hold sidewalks, or in this case, curb painting to a certain standard. And my desire is to just essentially to establish that standard, codify it, have it, and have a system of accountability whereby the council is being given updates annually or biannually of the state of parking, no parking striped curbs in the city of Kyle, and how many feet there are and how many feet we're repainting every year, and try to basically take the total amount that there is and divide it by how often we're trying to repaint them, and build that in as a maintenance program or standard in the city. So if you think about, for example, a fire lane, let's say its useful life is 4 years or 3 years, and then starting at year 2 or year 3, it's going to get to the point where it needs to be repainted. If you call it every 3 years, then essentially you have an inventory of fire lanes that you are responsible, the city is responsible for maintaining, divided by 3, and paint. Once a year, you go through and paint a third of the stripes. You just get a crew and you just go out and you just paint it all and do a good job. I think that's something that is worth at least taking a look at to determine what that responsibility might look like for Public Works, and also whether or not that's a standard we want to maintain citywide. And then also, once we figure out what standard we're going to hold ourselves to, then we could start asking other entities, private entities, to maintain to that same standard. And then all of a sudden, one day you look up and every sidewalk or every curb, no parking painted section in the city of Kyle is going to be within 3 years or so of new or fresh paint. It's worth it to me to establish that standard, so I wanted to propose it to council and see what your thoughts were. This is just a cross section that I took in driving around town for about an hour, but since then, all I see now are them. I've been looking for them. I see them everywhere, and with the exception of a lot of the newer roads and streets that have been constructed and parking lots that have been constructed, very few fire lane painted areas are maintained really at all. Most of them get painted and never touched again.
Good. I got a question for Harper on this subject.
Harper, we got you here. Yep, there he is. Go ahead.
Hey, Harper, this is Councilmember Rizzo. Do we have an airless system that we can keep on a truck and just drive up, paint them real quick, and have a stencil for that? I just think that'd be a really quick process. Do we have that system?
No, sir, but we can look into it.
We don't have one right now currently?
Not for that application, no, sir.
Okay, sounds good. That was what my question was, and I think with that system we could knock out quite a bit of these no fire lanes, no parking lanes, and do it really timely as well. With that, with a couple of stencils, I think the crew would be minimal. I guess the cleanup would be longer than the actual painting would be.
Yes, sir, that would be, if y'all chose to do that, that would be tasked with our street maintenance group. That'd be one of their tasks. And one thing to point out, and we'll do it if that's the council's decision, we'll paint the curbs. It's not an issue. One thing to point out though, Sanders was mentioned, and I think that there was already an agreement with Plum Creek set that when we painted those, that they were responsible to maintain those curbs after that first initial painting. So we'll have to go back and take that back. And then a second thing was the signage is what is enforceable versus the painting. So you can have striping on the ground, but that's not necessarily enforceable. You could have a sign and no striping, and that is enforceable. So where that painting is, we just need to make sure that the signage is still there if we want to have enforcement capabilities.
Well, that's only true in part, though, right, Harper? I mean, if you're parked within a few feet, however many feet of a fire hydrant, or within however many feet of an intersection, whether there's a sign there or not, you are prohibited from doing that. And the paint is really what I've experienced as being especially clear, bright, well-marked paint helps people not violate the law, whether there's a sign there or not.
Yes, you're correct. A fire hydrant, there's a distance for that. There's also a distance under traffic code, I believe, how far a distance you have to be from a stop sign or intersection. But if you're designating like no parking areas, those are enforceable through the signage, and that's a TMU TCD standard.
Right. And I'm not recommending that we go through and add a bunch of new paint in new intersections and new places. There are lots of streets that don't have curbs painted red in certain areas where it's very clearly no parking. And I was thinking, do we need that here? And the answer was no, because we already have the behavior that we want. It's really just about the particular areas where the stripes make sense and have value, where there's parking happening around certain areas, and we need them not to park in the designated spot. So that's kind of why Sanders kept being brought up. But, throughout Plum Creek and also along the east side as well, there are just certain areas where the stripes just aren't being maintained and they're fading, and it looks bad for one. But I think that uniform policy would be something that would be certainly worth looking into. And it's not the only uniform policy, but the direction that I'm hoping that we can give staff, if the council's agreeable to it, is not for them to go and start painting anything in particular, because this is just we need to kind of step back and survey where we are and kind of do kind of an audit, essentially, of our no parking striped areas. And kind of a condition report. It does not have to be where we spend 30 grand to hire some consultant to come in and tell us what we already know. That was not. We did that with the pavement index scoring. Is why I'm bringing that up. It doesn't have anything to do with today's agenda. That pavement index scoring was pretty interesting, because they went around with their little cameras and their little rollers, and they were they mapped it out and told us what streets we needed to fix and in what order. And that was helpful, but I don't really feel like we need that here. We just need to, just go out and kind of survey what's out there, how much it would take, divide out the lanes and the hours, and try to get some costs, preliminary rough costs so we can know. Because what I don't want to do is give Harper unfunded mandates, especially something like this, where it's never in the history of our city been something that has been an expectation, and all of a sudden we just say, can you please start doing this? There's impacts, and Harper needs and his crew need the chance to try to absorb that. Certainly, I don't see this as a failure in any part on Public Works. I just see it as something for us to take notice and try to elevate that standard. Gold standard.
So when we were considering these current curbs, and I know that we're promoting a lot of alleyway sort of residential areas, which would create some more of these issues. I think if we're going to do an assessment, that we look at those developments that we're going to be wanting that done, because they're going to be similar in scope and issues with the way that they're designed, so that we can incorporate that into the overall assessment, so we can ensure that we're giving Harper the best foot forward.
Are you saying the alleys themselves would be painted in spots?
Not just the areas that create parking issues.
Well, when we adopted
all alleyway parking does.
When we adopted the International Fire Code, that changed the street widths and made it such that, I forget what the minimum width needed to be, 30 feet, 28 feet, 26?
29 feet.
29 feet.
One-sided parking.
For one-sided. And a lot of the subdivisions that are out there are basically approving streets with only one-sided parking, but not necessarily anticipating that they're going to be painting all of that, I'm sure, which creates conflict and confusion. But there is kind of a certain sweet spot of a street width that you want that keeps traffic flowing slowly. You don't want it to be a highway. And so a one-sided parking makes a lot of sense there, but I think we do ourselves a lot of favor if we set a standard and save future councils a lot of headache as well, and just kind of adopt it into the rhythm of how we operate. Harper, how much time do you think you need to kind of do an assessment here?
Well, I guess it depends on the direction you want to go. If you want to go, like, how you had the fire chief go, he brought the last few streets that were narrower, he brought them in, signs were placed. So we could go back to those certain streets and paint those. And then Sanders, of course, you already mentioned a prime example. Any streets in the future that are going to have signage for one side only, we can make them do the red curves from this point forward if that's your choice. I see that as the way to go versus what you said earlier, just going around and painting all the streets that are too narrow, because I think that would be a great task. But if you're looking at going the route that I was just talking about, I think we could, we can handle that with our maintenance staff and make that part of our routine.
Would you be willing to codify that in writing? Because the goal would be to figure out what that standard is and actually put in writing what we're trying to accomplish, so that we can all kind of mutually agree between council and staff what standard we're going to hold ourselves to. And then I think that will help us when we start trying to hold commercial entities or HOAs to that same standard, because you can be sure if I'm still around, I'm going to bring up that standard for the subdivisions as well. But we need to do it ourselves first.
Yes, sir. I think we find that distance. I don't recall off the top of my head, because Kyle brought that, the chief of the fire department brought that to council in the past. So I say we get that distance, and the recent ones that the fire chief had passed, we can go do those recent ones, as well as Sanders has already won. And then anything in the future that requires one side parking, then the developer would have to do that initially, and then we would take over once that street was conveyed to us as a public street. Now, I will say the alleys, which was mentioned, just for everybody's clarification, we don't even maintain the alleys right now. All the alleys and subdivisions are all private. So that would be something you would have to look at and discuss as well if you wanted to think of doing something like that in the future.
Yeah, I wasn't necessarily adding the alleys, Harper, but what I was doing was those types of developments create similar things that are happening in Plum Creek.
Yes, sir.
So that's what I would want you to at least project out and plan for that, because once you start, then you start incorporating those other areas as well. So I just want to make sure that your eyes are wide open and you're getting all the data you need to make sure that you put together a good plan that, is considerate of all the costs and everything that you need to be successful. That's all.
Yes, sir. I think it's a fairly easy fix. As we're doing the plan reviews, every street that requires the one side parking with signage, we just make it mandatory that they paint the curbs as well. And then once we accept it, whenever it has to be painted from that point on, then we would overtake it.
Harper, can we start with an analysis of all the painted curbs in Kyle? A general analysis. You can break it down by subdivision. You can do it however it works out for you. But we need to know what our starting point is. What is the condition of painted curbs in the city of Kyle? I think what you're suggesting certainly is a good starting point, but it still doesn't establish the standard. And I think it's going to be probably the first thing that we do as far as a requirement on subdivisions. But I'd really like to know how many curbs we currently think are being maintained privately and whether they actually are or not. What's the status of curbs and curb paint in the city of Kyle? That analysis, I think, would help us to determine what impact our rules and changes and standards and expenses would take. What form is that going to look like?
Right. Yes, sir. I can get that together with my staff. We can go through each subdivision. Off the top of my head, I think the majority of everything that we have with that is going to be in the Plum Creek area. Hello.
Councilor Shield.
And I may have missed part of this conversation when I had to step aside. So what we're saying, though, is that pretty much all of these curbs are supposed to be maintained by somebody else, nobody in the city right now, correct?
I think that's what Harper is saying.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
The only thing that I can think of right now that we maintain is there was an area that, and I can't recall if it's painted or not, but they're in front of the Rocking Horse by Negley Elementary. I know we put up the signs there. Council wanted to put the signs up there. I think Leon brought it to council. And I can't remember if we went back later and painted it or not, but I will double check that.
okay, then I guess why don't we treat these like we're treating the drainage easements and say, you're supposed to maintain it, and if code enforcement comes by and sees that it's not being maintained to a standard, then we make that entity who's responsible for it take care of it like they're supposed to. And, why us take on that expense if they are supposed to be maintaining it?
I think it's hard to get a subdivision, all the different kinds of subdivisions, to agree to the same standard and maintenance. You'd have to almost pay somebody to get out there and issuing citations and working across the city to do it. I personally think that it would be easier and better for us to adopt a plan, to use our own resources and to go out there and just paint these things, because the sidewalk at Sanders was a pretty long one, and that got installed, I mean, and we don't even have the fancy equipment that Councilman Rizzo was talking about, and it got thrown up there in a hurry, and it looks fantastic. A year later, it looks fantastic. But here's my primary concern. You take all the sidewalk, or all the curbs that are painted in the city of Kyle that were ever painted red with fire lane, and you take a snapshot of where we are and how many of those have been properly maintained, whether it's by city or subdivision, whether it's Plum Creek or somewhere else, or, you know, there are a few, I think, probably that have been repainted since the beginning of Kyle, but very few. And the
But
majority
again,
of them are
probably-
going to zero. They're just being lost. You can't even tell that it was once painted red.
Right. And I understand that, but also code enforcement hasn't been,
I don't even know that we have that standard set up with code enforcement that
well, that's what I'm saying. Can
requires
we-
that to stay.
You know, if we set up that standard. and
It would
make-
be so I guess I'm thinking what actually gets the change, because what I'm looking at for is the change in the actual curbs themselves. I'm looking for those yellow ones at the top to turn back to red, and throughout the city, the areas where they're poorly maintained, to get them brought back up. We really have options. We can just go tell someone else that they have to do it, and try to force them all to hire contractors and get it painted. Or we could take a more proactive role, build the infrastructure internally, which I don't think would cost that much money or take that much time to go and just zip through and repaint things and do a good job. To me, that approach gets a lot more, we get a lot more done that way. We have a big impact on the way the town is viewed if we just get proactive just on this little thing and go out and start painting these things. And then at the same time, we can ask subdivisions too. I mean, I think in my mind, I think of it as kind of a joint. City of Kyle's taking the lead, just like sidewalks. You know, we're taking the lead on this, and then, but at the same time, if you want to maintain to that standard, if we're not moving fast enough for you, or if you want to do more than that, go for it. But I really feel like we need to start owning these public streets, in particular, the public streets, and start painting them where it makes sense to do so, and then maintaining them and build that into our workflow.
Just one other question real quick, and just to make sure, on these streets, a homeowner or property owner owns the property up to what point of the street? I think I was always under the impression that we owned that actual,
Curb.
Curb, thank you. We own the curb, and then the city brought it from the bottom, you know, on the street itself. So if it's my property, then I'm responsible for it,
No,
not
I
the
think
city.
the city owns the right of way, so we own the road, we own the curb, and we would be responsible for maintaining it, but for agreements, if there is an agreement,
Okay.
like say a subdivision wants to paint it,
Okay.
maybe
I-
we
as
would
I
go
said,
in and help
I was
them,
always
but
under the
they're.
impression I own my curb, so.
Well, from what I hear, Harper is pretty much saying that we've set up from the beginning that we don't maintain these things,
Okay.
and most subdivisions don't maintain them either.
Okay.
Even the ones like Plum Creek that have installed them. They may say they'll maintain them, but the ones that I just showed you here, those are all Plum Creek. So obviously, that's not happening.
Mhm.
Anything to add? Anyone? Worth at least having Harper take a longer look? Harper, now that you've heard us talk it through, I'm still looking for kind of a time frame for getting back kind of a response. I'm not wanting to hurry you, but I am wanting when you do come back, I am wanting for it to be, you know, a good solid look at this issue.
Yes, sir. I just want to make sure we don't miss anything. So going through thoroughly through each neighborhood throughout the city will take a little bit.
Couple months?
No, sir. No, sir. No, sir. Next council meeting, is that too long or do you need it sooner?
I think that'd be great, Harper. Also, I was looking at a couple of spray rigs right now as we're talking, so I know the rigs run about $7,000 to $8,000. I'd like to see what paint runs per square foot for curbs. It's one of the things I'd like to have is that number as well.
Yes, sir. I'll talk to Scott Egbert tomorrow and get with the staff. Also, I want to just make sure when you're talking about the fire lanes, we are talking all public roadways, correct?
For analysis,
Okay.
do you need that in direction, or you feel like you're good to go?
I'm good to go.
Okay. All right, so we'll plan on having that, Scott, we'll plan on having that back either at the next council meeting or the following. The following is also fine by me. So the first meeting in July is also fine if needed. So, all right, then no objections. City manager's report.
Mayor, Council, I didn't have a report, although I was asked to provide a quick update on the status of any protests or rioting done locally. So really the weekend here in Kyle was actually fairly quiet. However, we have had some protests staged in some of our surrounding communities, including San Marcos, Wimberley. I believe Buda will have one tomorrow. So far, we have not had one planned for an organized protest here in Kyle. We have had individuals standing with signs on our roadways over the weekend. We have had a little bit of graffiti in some of our neighborhoods that we have been very mindful of. We've watched that closely and we have taken care of it. The moment we hear about it, we will send one of our employees to go take care of that. We are trying to be proactive also. We're working with our local church community. Tomorrow morning there will be a prayer at the police station for our community at 8:30, right on cue. We're working with Allied Services of Kyle for maybe a larger prayer event for our community and our nation. More information may be forthcoming on that as well. We do know that there are groups that are staging protests, more official protests in communities, and their goal is to try to systematically hit each community. So there may be one coming here in Kyle. We just haven't been made aware of any yet. We do know of threats in general against police officers. We received basically a bulletin from the FBI recently about just practicing a little more vigilance due to those threats, and so we're monitoring that as well. But for the most part, we've not had anything organized here, and again, we're staying on top of anything that we learn about. You bet.
Thanks, Scott. I think we do still have an executive session, so Councilor Shield.
Pursuant to Chapter 551 Texas Government Code, the City Council reserves the right to convene into executive session from time to time as deemed necessary during this meeting. The City Council may convene into executive session pursuant to any lawful exception contained in Chapter 551 of the Texas Government Code, including any or all of the following topics: pending or contemplated litigation, or to seek the advice of the city attorney pursuant to Section 551.071, Anthem Elevated Storage. Taken, no action taken now. Do I have a motion for adjournment?
I'd like to motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right. The ayes have it, 6-1. All right.